Undead, those who cannot die even after death. For the immortals who escaped from the cycle of life and death, to subjugate one dimension turned out to be uncomplicated. The conquest of a world called the Earth seemed inevitable, and only a matter of time. Or at least they thought so. But something went wrong. Skeletons, not understanding what was happening, looked at the figure that came out of the flame. He was a man, just a man. Their bones trembled with bewilderment. How he is still alive. Why he did not die like everyone else. The figure walked forward, not paying attention to the heat and chaos. Perhaps the whole thing was stubborn, or something more. He threw a short phrase with a light grin. Perhaps he just turned out to be stronger. Hit. One of the skeletons scattered into pieces, as if its existence never had weight. The wreckage of the bones with a roar fell to the ground. 2 years ago he came to Seoul, hoping to change his life. But now all this seemed distant and almost meaningless. In the room there was a voice of a girl, breaking away from fatigue and irritation. She said that she endured it for too long, allowed him to stay when he promised to look for work. But everything she sees is the endless days spent by alcohol and video games. If he will continue, let him return to mom and dad. She is his younger sister, but she cannot rely on parents at that age. Tomorrow is New Year, and she demanded that he find at least some part-time job. He dismissed as always, offering to talk about this later. Tired, the head does not think. She exploded. Again. And he, without waiting for continuation, slammed the door to his room. Rumming heavily on the bed, he exhaled. He is miserable. It is disgusting for himself. Seoul did not give him anything except the internship in a large company, for which nothing followed. There was only a part-time job, a warehouse, or a worse. He remembered that he had not even turned off the game before leaving. Sigh now. If life was like a video game, everything is clear there. There are classes, tasks, levels. There he would find a suitable job for himself. You can become a warrior, a wizard, a swordsman. There you have a clear goal, and in reality, nothing but emptiness and guilt. He fell face in the pillow, trying to forget at least for a minute that tomorrow everything would be the same. He fell asleep, but suddenly messages appeared. A new connection was discovered with the measurement of the Haken. The land protection system was activated. Communication with the measurement of the Hake is temporarily prohibited. Training will begin on Earth. Haken stood, stunned, among a strange space, reminiscent of a game and a dream at the same time. Translucent inscriptions soared above the head, as in the video games in the interface. All this seemed ridiculous, unreal. He blinked, but the inscriptions did not disappear. Time until a complete connection with the measurement of the Haken continued to tick. Almost 5 years. The system with a cold, inhuman voice welcomed Kan Hen in entering the training. In total, the training of 8 stages. Death did not mean physical death, but excluded the possibility of reattempt. Award for completing training, activation of potential, and awakening. Everything looked like part of another fantasy. Gaming nonsense, caused by sleepless nights, overwork, reproaches of sister, and unrealization. Although whom it excites, this is just a dream. Maybe this is a sign from God for the last time to give it to the full. Thinking is another game. Entrance to the first stage. The system believes that his courage will save the Earth. It was reported about the upcoming training and the rules of the first stage. Get to the point of purpose, cross the bridge. Overcome your deepest fear. The condition of failure is death. Hakun suddenly ended up on a narrow stone bridge, under which a red, hot lava was seething. The heat burned the skin, as if everything was happening was not a dream, but a reality. On neighboring bridges, dozens of people crowded, the same confused and frightened. Among them, Kakina noticed his younger sister. Their mutual surprise only strengthened the sense of unreality. Both tried to explain what was happening. A minute ago, everyone was at home, and now in a strange world with a fiery abyss. The mind captured distant words about the salvation of the Earth and testing, but the meaning slipped into the general cacophony. The burning heat and the opportunity to conduct a coherent conversation prompted, "This is not an ordinary dream, but something more." Doubts melted, giving way to anxiety. Something unnatural and dangerous happened here clearly. Kyun thought, the human brain is easy to deceive because the pain in a dream is felt differently than in reality. He remembered an awkward episode when in a dream he decided that he had a good need and woke up with relief. The blanket was dry. The sister was only surprised at the stream of his thoughts. Kyun, deciding to act, announced that he intended to move to the edge of the bridge because the test condition was to reach the end. He considered that since all this is like a dream, any fall would only wake him. The sister pointed to the risk, but Kahyun remained with her opinion. Their dispute was interrupted by a scream. One of the test participants broke down. The human figure plunged into lava. Over the surface for a moment, only an elongated hand lingered, before disappear in a hot stream, raising the clubs of gray smoke. Both stunnedly watched the illusion of sleep gaining frightening reality. The sister looked at Kanhyun, reminding him of his former words. He thought, the cry that they just heard sounded too believable. And although he tried to maintain composure, doubt began to arise in his chest. The sister, without waiting for confidence from him, decided to move the first. Carefully crawled on her knees along a narrow stone bridge hanging over a hot lava. She warned her brother. Walking on her feet would be too risky. Kanhyun, although he tried to maintain the appearance of confidence, reluctantly admitted that it was probably more reasonable to crawl. The lava boiled below, the heat rose up, burning the skin even at a distance. The rest of the people who were on the bridges also began to slowly move forward, almost all on all fours. Panic gave way to caution and fear. The sister spoke again. She tried to understand what happened to them, and she was sure it was not just a dream. Everything is too realistic to be an ordinary nightmare. She expressed doubt that death here may not have consequences. Kanhyun, who had previously waved with her fears, now really thought. His confidence gave a crack. Whatever it is, it definitely went beyond the usual perception of sleep. He pressed his lips with difficulty, holding back irritation. He tried to ignore all this. Fear, heat, panic. But Kankun's words again reminded of what was happening. He lay right on the bridge, admitting that it was paralyzed by fear. He was the most unreliable older brother, and she, watching him, involuntarily agreed with his thought. He sighed heavily, pressed himself against the cold stone, and offered to take a break. His arms and legs trembled, his body refused to obey. Suddenly, the interface window surfaced in front of them. The cold text without emotions said that enough time has passed since the beginning of the training, and now the level of complexity is increasing. A second later, the stone bridge cried underfoot, crackled, and fragments began to crumble. There were screams. People panicked. Some lost their balance and fell into the seething lava below. The heat intensified. The screams became louder. Someone screamed that the bridge was crumbling, and the crowd rushed forward. Kanhyun froze, struck by panic, but his sister's voice pulled him out of the numbness. She already rose and ran forward. He screamed to her to wait and rushed after him. The stones behind them disappeared. The bridge collapsed rapidly. Kanhyun rushed with all his might, feeling the hot air began to burn from behind. He forced himself to concentrate. The bridge is wide enough. It will not fall if it does not look down. Only forward, just step by step. He repeated to himself as a mantra. Everything is in order. He would not fall. He almost came. Confidence grew with every step. This is not the end. He will cope. Everything will end soon. Kanhyun noticed how massive stone slabs fall over his sister. He jumped from his own span to her, managed to push his sister aside, and thereby remove from the blow. At the same moment, the interface confirmed the completion of the first stage. The training recognized them, temporarily awakened, and accrued a reward, promising a full awakening at the end of the entire program. Physical and nervous overload affected instantly. Kanhyun was exhausted to the point that he could barely move his fingers. On the screen, the status of the sister displayed the parameters of the body and spirit: strength, dexterity, endurance, magical power. There is also one free characteristic and unique feature: calm. Sister showed gratitude for salvation. Both still had to comprehend the data seen. The next awareness of the incident came to Kanhyun in his own room. Reality seemed to return in an instant, as if there was a sharp exit from the game. On social networks, discussions were already seething. Users shared the same collective sleep testing. They argued about the meaning of death in a dream, published playful memes and links to chats. For owners of unique abilities, someone even managed to invest in fictional training coins. Meanwhile, the global timer continued to count the time until a complete connection with the world of Haken. 4 years, 384 days, 15 hours. The world has clearly changed, and with it, the life of everyone who has passed the first stage. There was an early morning. The door to Kankun's room opened, and he heard his sister's voice. Kanahyun called him. He immediately asked if she was in a dream. in the very one where it was necessary to walk along the bridge over Lavoy and where she almost died. It turned out that she also remembers everything. It was not just a dream, they both felt it. The most important thing is the state window that appeared in the final and the realism of what is happening. They interrupted each other, trying to speak out first but quickly switched to a quarrel. He turned his backs and snorted. However, after a moment, both thought and said almost simultaneously, "Maybe we'll eat it first." The answer was a unanimous yes. Early morning, in trends, a dozen strange words from the end of the world to the state window. The news tape confirms the same nightmare visited millions. The continents are noisy. The rank training worries analysts. Hawken measurement is still an incomprehensible term. Journalists calculated 3 or 4 out of 10, there were almost no serious injuries. Seoul streets are feverish. The windows are broken, the crowds fight for any product. Subjected prophets with banners broadcast about a close sentence to the world. Kan Hyun and sister are observing chaos from the balcony, feeling the heat of growing panic below. The way out seems to be madness. The work is canceled, transport is worth it. Checking the status windows shows a 5-year-old timer until a full connection. For almost 5 years, they look like a generous period for preparation, but there are still no plans. Experts are silent, advise you to stay at home, and stir with a provisional. The hot city seems to wait for the second wave of events. The sister fears the future. The brother evaluates the supply of food. Both decide to wait out the first days until the streets are cooled and the information does not clear. By the evening, the chaos of the first day laid down. The streets were cleaned, most residents returned to the usual concerns, and relative stability reigned in the country. Kan Hyun lay down to sleep was again in the space of training. The interface window surfaced in front of him, welcoming it and offering instructions. He ignored the introductory part and immediately requested his own characteristics. The status of the panel showed the name Kan Hyun. The title is the first-level newcomer. The main parameters were distributed as follows: Strength 8, Dexterity 9, Endurance 8, Magical Power 14. A special line, unique ability, is Resurrection. There was no experience to compare these figures with nothing, but high magical power looked promising. Kankena attracted the main attention of the unique ability. The system guaranteed a return to life a day after death. Moreover, the Renaissance point was the last place of death, unless otherwise indicated. A fine was relied on for this. All the parameters were reduced to the level and additionally fell half by 24 hours. Realizing that his life from now on does not come down to one attempt, Kan Hyun experienced a surge of relief and delight. The ability to resurrect opened scope for risk and experiments, despite the concomitant restrictions. Kan Hyun was face to face with the very first nightmare of his learning: brutal reality. The first goblin fell quite easily, only because Kan Hyun found him by surprise. But the victory did not bring satisfaction. He was shaking from awareness. He killed a living creature, led him in the framework of some training. However, this did not end there. A goblin warrior appeared in front of him, many times more massive and dangerous. The sword is more than a meter, teeth like knives, movements clear and decisive. And here he is, Kan Hyun, standing with a cheap mace, only 70 centimeters long, with hands weak from a sedentary life, without skills and experience. Hit. The goblin brought down the sword with force. Kan Hyun tried to defend himself with a mace, but it was like defending himself with a toothpick from the hammer. The blow knocked out the weapon from his hands and knocked down. He could not even cry out. A lump of horror was stuck in his chest. Why is he here? Why he should go through this at all? Rage and despair fought inside him. Goblin did not kill him right away. Instead, he grabbed Kan Hyun by the shirt and dragged. Where, it was incomprehensible. On the ground like a bag. The back was ripped off, the clothes were torn. Kan Hyun no longer shouted, he only silently prayed to wake up. There was much more blood in his own body than could be imagined. This became clear after he felt every drop, slowly flowing from the wounds. The fear of death approached gradually, like a cold loop on the throat. An agony which continued without end, turned into a quiet, inhuman torture. 4 goblins were in no hurry to finish off the victim and forced her to pray for the last breath. At dawn, the sister jumped up, torn from a nightmare with the same repeating vision. The head was split, as if pegs were driven into it, and a quiet, almost soundless sob was heard behind the wall. In the next room, Kan Hyun sat on the bed, wrapped in a blanket. The body trembled, his eyes looked into the void. The images of the goblins still pursued him, and each memory spoke with a panic whisper. He recalled how his nails pulled one at a time, blood dripped, and his body trembled with pain and fear. He explained how he died of bleeding, exhausted and crippled. His sister interrupted the story, unable to withstand the details of torture. She mentioned that she also died, but her death was not so painful. Sister teased him for tears, but sympathized inside. He said that even Guanu would call his mother in such a situation. The sister clarified whether he needed a doctor and remembered the statistics. The number of patients with psychotraumas has increased sharply in 2 days. Kanyon replied that he had no money for the hospital. The sister said, "Earn," and turned away. He concluded that death is the path to completing training. Kanyon hoped that past death would give him a break. The screen flared up before my eyes. The training is not over. A message appeared. An error occurred, an immediate transition. The inscription read, "Let your courage save the earth. Stage 2, round 2 begins," was written in the window. Kanhyun froze, seized with horror. The body began to tremble again. Kanhyun is angry with the system, realizing that there is no ending in training. He is trying to get enough sleep, but is constantly restarting in the next round. The thought of an endless loop brings it to despair. Hunger only enhances irritation. Last time he chose a mace for a simple shock. Now he decides to avoid close combat and takes a bow, examines a crossbow and a spear. The South Korean reservist recalls the shooting training and aims in 2 goblins. The first arrow flies past, revealing inexperience with new weapons. Goblins notice a mistake and growling rush to the attack. Kanyon goes to the spear, sticks him into the first enemy. The blade stucks in the carcass, interfering with pulling out the weapon. The second goblin already brings a sword. Kanyon does not have time to turn around. A powerful blow is an instant death without torment. The body collapses to the ground. Kanhyun wakes up in a room, covered by horror, but rejoices in a short pain. The interface is activated again, declaring a stage error and immediate restart. The system requires new courage, promising the salvation of the earth outside of fear. Kanhyun grimaced on the next slogan of Salvation of the Earth. Stage 2, round 3 launches. The system gives a sword and a shield. All day he leafed through the videos about fencing, hoping for a miracle. Goblins flew from all sides, panic spreading movements to chaos. Broke, pain, red screen, an instant return to the cold room. Fury hisses inside. The sister watches because of the door, not daring to enter. The system appears before the eyes again, stamping the same type of restarting windows. Round 4 starts, hands are shaking, but the sword still rises. The first waves are rash, but the muscle gradually catches a familiar rhythm. Stats confirm endurance grows per unit for a hard 8-hour training. The state window flashes, level 1, strength 8, dexterity 19, endurance 8, magic 14. One additional ball supports the smoldering hope for growth. Kanyon decides to put a free score into force, feeling the warmth that spills in the muscles. The blade seems a little easier. The step is more stable for a moment. Breathing is smoother. 2 new points of characteristics raise the confidence of Kanyon. Fatigue deprived of accuracy, the goblins killed him again. The system restarted the round of 5, mingling the growth of endurance. In the round, he coached the strength for 10 hours in a row. The first goblins fell easily, but the remaining defeated its number. Again, the loading window in the round of the round is 7. Kanhyun waved his sword until the muscles were burning. Endurance rose even by units' willpower. The body lifted, the sword fell out of his hands, the hero collapsed to the ground. The interface issued a message about the creation of basic fencing. The skill leveled the rack and taught him to correctly distribute force. The simple technique of bandits was better than a complete amateurism. Joy flashed like a spark in the darkness of endless deaths. Burning eyes look at green enemies with a new thirst for battle. The sword rises again, promising goblins an ambulance. At the second stage, there are only 5 goblins. 2 at the gates of the fortress. 3 in the dark middle of the forest. The first 2 serve as a light scumbag in front of an alarming thicket, where the rest are hidden. The last opponent remains apart, a real test for strength and skill. Kanhyun holds the shield, reflecting the heavy waves of the axe. The new ability slows down the world. The goblin blows are read in advance. The body reacts before thought, but fatigue already pulsates in the veins. 4 fallen enemy douse the stratum stir. The goblin makes a jerk, expanding the distance of an unexpected axe. Kankun's blade is knocked out and stuck into the ground. An unarmed warrior evades, the shield is buzzing under every blow. The goblin growls, reveling in a protracted hunt and someone else's pain. The monster presses the pace, trying to exhaust the victim to the limit. Blows become template. Trajectories are easily read. Kanyun evades, saving strength and waiting for the counter, show. On a distorted goblin muzzle, irritation from the misses grows. Kayun grabs a stone from the ground, the eyes are full of despair and anger. With a sharp movement, he beats the goblin on the leg, a blow. The monster yells in pain, jumping on one leg. His face is skewed. Tears flow through the dirty face of the enemy. It is weakened. Kayun yells from rage, waving and hits the enemy in the head of the enemy. Blood splashes. The goblin falls. The body twitches in convulsions. He stands above him. His breath is torn. His eyes burn. The dialogue box flashes. The stage is completed. The awards have been received. +5 stats. The skills are unlocked. Shield, crossbow. The choice of weapons is open. The level is increased. Kahyun laughs, fists clenched. His face is distorted by a triumph. Now he is higher. He is stronger. He is alive. Kahyun laughed loudly, interrupting the silence of the morning in the real world. He enjoyed the moment, thinking what a beautiful beginning of the day. He is Kahyun. He feels power after the second stage. He decided to prepare breakfast in honor of victory, full of pride and hopes. But suddenly he spat out food. The sister ran into the room, shocked and outraged by his words. Dialogues flashed in both, reporting on the completion of the training of the earth. Now you can use the system freely. Notifications were used. Huge gates appeared on the street, the first gates of the dungeon. The crowd gathered, looking at the impressive gate. They were amazed at the scale. The gate arose not only with them, but around the world, a global threat. The task is to go through the dungeon at a given time. Otherwise, it is not known what will happen. The timer showed -4 years, 357 days, 13 hours, 59 minutes, and 51 seconds. After the appearance of the dungeon, the world became much more chaotic and unpredictable. At first, they decided not to leave the house to figure out the situation and collect information. It turned out that the training has not yet been completely completed, despite the previous stages. Not only newcomers are now joining the passage, the minimum age is 17 years. In the comments section, full chaos reigns due to the dungeon and the news associated with it. Sister noted that people are unhappy with a hurry and call past training awaken. Kahyun noticed that many can include the status window. He tried to open the status window, but the system replied that it was not completed until the training is completed. Kahyun realized that there are still 6 stages ahead after the second, and many have already passed them. Kahyun was desperately looking for another way, except to go through all the stages. He asked his sister if there was at least some information about the third stage. The answer was disappointing. There is almost no information. Even little is known about the second stage. Kahyun doubted whether it was worth going into battle again, but he realized that there was no choice. He felt that he had become stronger and would no longer tolerate defeat. He decided to go through the third stage with confidence and accuracy. The night came, and the third stage of training began. The monster urinates right at him, and he is full of rage. Each muscle screams, "Kill, destroy." The damned monster, he will pay for everything. The heart beats faster, adrenaline goes off scale. He is ready to fight to the last breath. In this battle, there is no place for fear or doubt, only the determination and thirst for victory. Kanyun stood in the middle of a foggy forest, where the third stage of the test began. On the screen in front of him flashed, Stage 3 begins. Prove perseverance, victory. To kill the leader of the Gurkov, defense is death. The advice of the system was foggy. If you wait long, then the opportunity will appear. He looked at himself. The disguise costume looked ridiculous, like a parody of a spy film. But the main thing is the goal, to eliminate the unknown leader of the Gurkov. First of all, he decided, we need to find this leader. But first were to check the results of the second stage, which then there was no time to think. Status window, Kanhyun, level 2.4, Disha 10, Dexterity 10, Endurance 11, Magical Force 14, additional. Stats, Aram. Skills, fencing, shield, crossbow. Unique ability, resurrection. He looked with pride. This should look like the status of a real awakened. The basic skill of the crossbow improved the possession of weapons and the accuracy of shooting, but the description ridiculed the tactics of the coward. The basic skill of the shield made it possible to protect himself more efficiently, but was accompanied by a sarcastic phrase on the protection of local children from ridicule. Both descriptions caused irritation. He distributed additional glasses, 4 by force, 2 in endurance, 1 in dexterity. The decision was practical and thoughtful. In the body there was a slight severity, the consequences of the growth of characteristics. The system prompted to check the inventory. Inside lay a worn-long sword. Despite the appearance, the weapon seemed reliable. Kanhyun appreciated his weight and balance, was pleased with the find. Preparation is completed. All stats are taken into account, skills are checked, the equipment is collected. It remained to find the goal, the mysterious leader of the Gurfkov. The forest ahead was dark and dense. The air was moist and alarming. It was time to move. Kanhyun recalled the name of Carlos Heskok, Legends of Sniper Business. His feat inspired to crawl 1.4 kilometers for several days to eliminate the target. This man became a symbol of perseverance and composure. And now Kanhyun felt the same earth under the body, the same humidity, the same silence before the shot. For 10 hours he slowly moved forward. Each centimeter was given with effort. The muscles ached, the clothes stuck to the skin. He almost got. There is very little left. 2 guards stood in the post ahead, without movement, like a statue. The thought of the frontal breakthrough occurred. Too risky. The field does not forgive errors. The pants got wet from the urine, which he involuntarily released. The body refused, succumbing to the pressure of fear and long tension. Prillic grass scratched the skin through clothes, and insects crawled under the cloth, as if the earth itself tried to stop it. Suddenly, a monster grew up in front of him. The yellow stream ran on him. He clenched his teeth. This is a test of perseverance and patience. He reminded himself about this again and again, like a spell. But the monster urinated right at him. The limit was passed. Something in consciousness broke off. Not a thread, but a whole rope. He broke, jumped up, and rushed at the monster. The sword stuck into the flesh. The creature collapsed. Kanhyun exhaled. It was an empty rage, but the result was useful. But not all over. The second monster was already standing in front of him. Mysterious sounds merged with night air. The torches flashed. The whole village rose by alarm. Silhouettes rushed to him from all sides. He was surrounded. A click sounded in his head. Since everything went to hell, it is time to pronounce the phrase that he always wanted. He shouted her into the face of an impending horde. Well, let's attack me, damn monsters. And then the system recorded. The skill of the lion roar of rage was created. A wave of anger tore the air. The monsters froze, their stats collapsed. Pieces of bodies soared into the air, scattered by one outbreak of insane determination. Stage 3, Round 2, began. Lion Reich squeezes stats, and the moral of enemies removes debuffs, inspires fear, relieves all the effects. Kanhyun took out 1,000 hours of battles and deduced the main rule. It is necessary to beat the leader while the village has a minimum of guard. In the afternoon, the Gurk warriors go hunting, return to twilight. In midday silence, only weak remained. Kanhyun slides to the tents. The leader of the leaders stands in the center. The throne is lit by the heat of torches. 2 shamans stand on the sides. Inside, a trap of magic fetters the body of an uninvited guest. Low-rank printing at the muscles, breathing becomes heavier. Panic is replaced by a memory of the roar of Leo rage. The impulse of the power of the soul breaks the wagons. The torches go out. Shamans grab amulets, but it's too late. The roar rolls along the yurt. The power of enemies collapses. Kanhyun rushes forward. The sword leaves the silver arc. Steel sticks into the chest of the leader. He falls from the throne. Shamans turn to dust from a wave of horror. The interface flashes with victorious light. The stage is completed. Intermediate body regeneration is spilled with a hot wave. The system records a new passage speed record. The temporary title is unshakable, plus to all the stats. Kanhyun felt a triumph. He passed the 3rd stage in just 2 days, unlike the 2nd phase, which took him for a whole week. It seemed not just progress, it was a jump, a sign of something more. He began to seriously think, maybe he is really a genius. After all, if such a pace is preserved, the 4th stage will pass in a matter of minutes. In the imagination, Kanhyun was already fighting with the dragon, evading the fire jets and inflicting deaths, like the hero of the ancient epic. But reality, as always, burst without an invitation. Almost a month has passed. The news on the screen reported on the current state of affairs. 25 days from the beginning of sending detachments awakened to clean up the dungeons, 40% of the territories were cleaned. Meanwhile, the government has already discussed the introduction of premiums for the participants. People got used to a new reality. Dungeons, monsters, system, everything has become part of everyday life. In the kitchen, the sister of Kanhyun fried eggs and listened to the news in the background. Kanhyun still did not stop. Morning screams became every day. She snorted, not taking her eyes off the pan. He seemed to be an arrow in the back of his head, but he only boasted that he destroyed everyone. She told him to just eat, reminding him that if he screams in the morning, the neighbors will definitely complain. Kanhyun snapped, but then fell silent. The sister looked at him and suddenly stopped. Something has changed. In his gaze, in movements, in how he said, he became different. Kanhen admitted that learning acts on his nerves. The sister noticed that his face seemed to be on the face of the criminal. Kanhyun warned to follow the expressions. He was still an older brother. He analyzed the following task. The fourth stage was completely different from the previous ones. It was a team test. The group in which he found himself consisted of participants acting on their own scripts and judgments. Each had its own role, their own weaknesses and principles. The task is to destroy the core of the dungeon while bringing everyone to the end alive. Failure meant death. Initially, the situation seemed simple. Kanhyun easily took the lead. He used combat skills, inspired allies, covered them on the front line. Attention was attracted not only by his actions, but also by the confidence with which he acted. However, it soon became clear. Not all members of the group agreed with its decisions. Some argued, offered to retreat, doubted his strategy. Despite the tension and lack of supplies, the group still went forward. Kanhyun felt increasing pressure because now he answered not only for himself. Each step demanded caution, each order, confidence. He realized that power is not only in blows and abilities, but also in the ability to keep the group together, despite doubts and fear. Kanhyun felt how he was approaching a new step, not just surviving, but the one who leads others. The intermediate regeneration of the body obtained after the third stage turned out to be a key skill. It allowed even the most severe wounds to heal, including amputations, restoring damage with magical energy. The bones could grow together in just a day, a real miracle for a fighter in such conditions. However, despite this power, the process of passing the fourth stage dragged on for a month. The problems began on the first night, when it was expected that the allies would be on duty in turn, but instead they ambushed. Kanhyun was taken aback and killed. It was a deliberate trap, an answer to its insolence in the sacred dungeon. The sister warned him that he would first swallow the food before talking. After the revival and restoration, he realized that repeating situations and the same characters did not allow to move forward. But in extreme conditions, the one who knows how to think non-standard survives. Thanks to his mind and determination, Kanhyun found a way out, to destroy all annoying enemies without hesitation and continue to move forward. This was the only way to win and end the stage. The fourth stage approached the final. People were in suspense and doubts. There is too little food, the risk of being left without prey, the fear of not finding the core of the dungeon. Doubts and fears grew, disputes and threatening cries, accusations of recklessness sounded. But Kanhyun took responsibility. He strictly stated that everyone should obey his instructions. Resistance meant death, complaints too. He took advantage of his skill, everyone closed his ears and paid attention to him. His determination and firmness were so unexpected and gestured that he even hit one of the guys to stop the riot. People, despite the confusion, understood. It would be for him to follow because he knows the way. The internal authority of Kanhyun left no choice. Who disobeys is doomed. Kanhyun possessed the title of Unshakable, was at the 14th level with high indicators of strength, endurance, and magic. Its unique abilities are resurrection, sword ownership, basic techniques with a shield and crossbow, the ability of a roar of rage, and the intermediate regeneration of the body gave it a significant advantage. It was a leader who was ready to conduct responsibility even in the most cruel conditions. Kanhyun collided with the last skeleton, who swung his sword at him. Quickly grabbing the enemy's weapon, he hit the skeleton's head with a handle, and he scattered into pieces. It was the last threat. All skeletons were destroyed. People around were stunned. Among them, there were only the bones of the vanquished. Kanhyun saw the nucleus of the dungeon and realized what was now needed to simply destroy the source of the dungeon force. Having made a blow, he completed the task. The system congratulated him on the successful passage of the fourth stage and issued awards, a new level, enhanced stats, and unique abilities. Among the awards were the skill One Blow, Two Halves, which allows to divide the enemy's body into two parts, ignoring part of the defense, as well as a magical accessory, a Ring of Strong Mind. Kan Yun continued to collect magic stones falling out of monsters, although the appointment of some of them remained unknown. He understood that over time, all these objects could become useful. Thanks to the abilities and objects received, his strength grew, and there were new tests ahead. The Ring of Strong Minds had a strength of 100 out of 100 and was issued by the Imperial Guard of the Hendeli Empire. Despite the fact that it was a standard model, it was distinguished by outstanding characteristics because only the most elite knights received it. The abilities of the ring included immunity to all the effects of mental magic and the status of mental control of the rank A and lower, as well as the function Visible-Invisible, which made it a valuable artifact. He noted that his last achievements were impressive. He pressed 300 times in a row, which testified to serious physical progress. In real life, training became less and less effective, and he thought about visiting the gym for a variety. Suddenly, a mobile phone rang. It was an emergency notification from the Ministry of National Security. In the area of the 20 Dong, the gates of the dungeon opened, and residents were recommended to stay at home and be vigilant. Screams and sounds of destruction came from the street. The goblins attacked, defeated the windows, and killed people, causing panic among the inhabitants. The gates of the dungeon had to be protected in a limited time. Otherwise, they would remain open. Kan Yun thought that perhaps today he would even apply for the cleaning of the dungeon. He was going to go to work with his sister. It was necessary to protect Kanachin. He urgently needed to find a weapon, something suitable for the battle. Kan Yun was desperately looking for a weapon, but in this place there was not even an ordinary longsword. In the end, he grabbed a kitchen knife that lay nearby. Having run out into the street, clouds floated along the sky. As if nothing had happened, he fled with all his might. He felt the long-awaited tension of the battle. In front of him were numerous goblins. Their sounds resembled karuk, karuk, and although he could not fully use his skills, but this attracted the attention of the monsters. The goblins rushed into him on the attack, but Kan Yun carefully studied their movements, trying to determine the level of threat. Knowing that one cannot completely rely on experience from training, enemies could be stronger. He moved into a counterattack using the kitchen knife, spectacularly dealt with the goblins, cutting them into pieces. As a result, he realized that even such a simple knife can be used with great benefit. The multi-story office building was covered by panic. People barricaded the doors, trying to protect themselves from growing noise outside. Fear reigned everywhere. In one of the offices, his sister looked at the correspondence on the phone. Kan Hen welcomed her and was interested in whether she was at work. With every moment, the sounds became louder and sinister. Suddenly, they began to break through the door. The man who turned out to be Kan Hyun, his older brother, calmly went into the office. He admitted that he did not want to break anything. And then he shouted the name of his sister, Kan Ah-hyun, to whom he came to the rescue and saved her from danger. Kan Hyun burst into the office, waving a knife and saying that he had come to the rescue. People in confusion asked about him and his relationship with Kan Ah-hyun, not understanding who he was and what was happening here. One of the men expressed dissatisfaction with the fact that the barricade was broken and did not know what to do now. Panic grew due to the approach of monsters. Kan Hyun apologized for his uncontrolled power, but soon he reassured everyone he destroyed the goblins alone. People were amazed at his skill and began to support each other, hoping that they could hold out and defeat the enemy. He urged not to panic and act together. Realizing that the number of goblins is growing and they can be on the upper floors, Kan Hyun insisted on the need to maintain vigilance and try to sleep at least a little before the upcoming battle. The sister carefully poured water on Kan Hyun's wounds, trying to save water because their reserves were limited. She reproached him for frequent injuries, and he explained this by the lack of evasion skills. Although the ability to stand most of the blows was good, now devoid of the opportunity to use skills, he felt vulnerable. The sister reminded that he could not resurrect without skills and criticized his too aggressive approach in battle, albeit impressive but dangerous. The sister shared that several elders want to meet him and asked him to have his type. Kan Yun thought about getting acquainted with someone who could accept him as he is. with sharp words and screams in the morning and all its unpredictability. Suddenly, he caught his eye with a system window with a task to prove his wisdom, which reminded of 5 tests. At this moment, the girl, jokingly nicknamed the succubus, added a touch of light irony to the company's conversation. Kan Yun was in a difficult situation where it was necessary to defeat the succubus, disguised as a person. The conditions of the problem were clear. If the succubus reveals its true essence, those who notice this will be in danger and become the first victims. Succubi, demons of dreams, known for their beauty and the ability to suck vitality from people in a dream. In this scenario, the knowledge of the existence of succubus was well known. Kan Hyun listened to questions and discussions, realizing that it is very difficult to determine which of those present could be succubus. All women seemed too beautiful and mysterious. He thought and involuntarily looked at one of them, feeling that the ring of strong mind could help. This ring, issued by the Imperial Guardsmen of the Hendley Empire, had a high level of protection. It gave immunity to all the mental effects of the rank A and lower, and also had a unique option of visible and invisible, what made him an indispensable tool against such magical threats. The night came, and they broke the tents. Kunyun sat by the fire and reflected on the stages past. The first is the Inferno Circus, the second is a weekly battle with goblins, the third is 10 hours of crawling, after which the monster doused him with urine, and the fourth, a monthly, painful project, as if from hell. Now, finally, he could afford to relax and do something more interesting, and not just survive. He experienced mixed feelings, regret that he had cursed fate, and gratitude for the preparation gave him the necessary skills and experience. However, he understood. One cannot allow himself to relax. It was necessary to carefully control the expression on the face, because the one who reveals the identity of the succubus will become a target. Kanyan thought that if there really is succubus among them, then this is most likely a strong creature that can disguise himself under a person and own magic. Therefore, it was wise to use NPC and not to attack blindly. It is especially important that it is easier for men to get under the charms of succubus, so it is more reasonable to use a woman. As a result, he decided to postpone all questions for later and try to sleep in order to better think over the situation and prepare for the upcoming tests. Konyun woke up and saw a familiar ceiling. It was Ah-hyun's office. People said nearby they were going to wake him and to inform that the army had already arrived. The thought flashed in my head that perhaps he was killed in a dream, since he woke up here. Surely she guessed that he knew everything. He was surprised when he heard the news. The military appeared on the streets with trucks that shot goblins. Kanhena looked out the window and saw that the army really arrived. Now, it seemed, one could breathe a sigh of relief. The weapons and equipment of the military were much more effective against these monsters. Kanyun looked out the window, feeling that this was far from the end of trouble. It did not fit in his head why he had such an alarming sense of danger. From the street came the screams and sounds of shooting. The military tried to suppress the goblins, but it seemed that their efforts were useless. There were more and more monsters. One of the soldiers complained that specialists, and not ordinary fighters, especially right before their vacation. Suddenly, a huge goblin appeared on the battlefield, red and powerful. The military opened fire, but the bullets, it seemed, did not harm him. The monster continued to advance, confidently ignoring the attacks. The goblins suddenly jumped on them, and as a result, many soldiers were killed instantly. Panic covered the remaining ones, and Kang-hyun watched what was happening anxiously, trying to understand what to do next. At this moment, a dialogue box appeared on the screen. Hobgoblin, as if reminiscent that the danger is just beginning. Military vehicles left the battlefield. The wounded soldiers were confused. The wounded talked, trying to understand what happened to the 3rd Detachment, and searched for a signalman who was supposed to request support. The captain, feeling severe pain in his head, shouted loudly about the division of the Red Dog, expressing bewilderment from the scale of the disaster. At that moment, Hobgoblin appeared, a new monster, formidable and dangerous. The military was waiting for support, but they were informed that only one civilian would arrive, which caused their shock and distrust. The monster went on the attack, and despite the shots, the weapons of the soldiers began to junk at the most inopportune moment. Then Kang-hyun suddenly appeared on the battlefield. He grabbed a huge stone and threw it into the monster, which was knocked down and fell to the ground. The military was struck by his appearance and quickly sent a weapon at him, considering him a threat. Kang-hyun asked them to lower the weapon and emphasized that he was a man. The soldiers, still confused, recognized him as a volunteer and asked for forgiveness for distrust. Kan Yun explained that he did not come here out of a sense of justice, but rather out of necessity. At that moment, the goblin rose and was preparing for a new attack, clearly focusing on Kan Yun. He understood that if the army was destroyed, the monsters will go to the sisters' company. He insisted that the military would not shoot him, as bullets could harm him. Then Kan Yun asked if they had tear gas, to which the soldiers replied that almost all operational weapons were charged and ready for use. Kan Yun calmly asked the military to serve tear gas. The military previously recalled the need to put on gas masks. Kan Yun only strictly warned not to shoot him. The military quickly reacted and prepared for battle, putting on protective equipment. His sister watched what was happening, and I heard a warning to shoot only at approaching monsters, avoiding fire to the center of the street. When the smoke from the gas cans filled the space, the goblin began to experience a sharp pain in his eyes and published piercing cries. Kan Yun did not lose time and rushed to the attack, first disarming the monster, discarding his weapons, and then striking. The military, who watched the battle, were struck by the strength and stamina of Kan Yun, and the soldier who appeared from behind admitted that Kan Yun was awakened, and that he was not the only one who came to the rescue. Kenken's blade touched the ground. He finished the attack. This monster was much more tenacious than expected. All blows passed by the target without causing tangible harm. Endurance gradually exhausted, and Kan Yun thought about the need for implant in order to strengthen himself. Its strong side is to cut, but now this was not enough. At this moment, the newly arrived assistant in the gas mask quickly struck the goblin, causing a sharp cry of pain. The stranger appreciated the power of the monster. This goblin was clearly awakened, the boss of the Dungeon F, the rank. Despite the strong defense at the monster, weaknesses remained. They discussed the strategy. Physical strength was small, and Kan Hyun's endurance at the limit. It was clear that a point attack on vital zones was needed. While one was holding back the goblin, Kan Hyun fled to the monster thrown out, trying to use it. He had an idea. In the end, a weak area was chosen, the skin behind the joint. Kan Hyun on a grand scale struck a decisive blow. Everyone held their breath, watching the goblin's reaction. But instead of the expected weakness, an unexpected pity that swept Kan Hyun followed. Kan Hyun hit the goblin right in the ass, and the unpleasant sensation flashed along the handle of the axe. The question flashed in my head whether the anus could be considered a vital point. He doubted that this blow would lead to instant death, but the decision was made instantly, and the body had already fulfilled the next movement. The goblin was cut and collapsed to the ground. Kan Hyun rushed on the attack further, still hoping that not all of his flesh is equally invulnerable. He hit the goblin in his mouth, and the blood sprinkled everywhere. The awakened, who watched from afar, was struck by the skill of Kan Hyun and could not understand where he got such an experience. A person was not registered in the training system. A golden sign appeared near the goblin. There was no information about the subject. The subject could not be checked due to ongoing training. The awakened tried to warn about the correct distribution of objects. But Kan Hyun practically coped with the monster alone and was determined to leave. He gave a smelly, that is, an amazing axe and said goodbye, leaving the awakened in bewilderment. Having removed the mask, he thought, "Who is this mysterious person?" A few hours after victory, twilight sank into the ruins of the streets. The surviving signs blink with lights. The situation seems to have calmed down a little. Brother and sister return home on empty roads. The smell of Gary is felt in the air. The apartment is open wide. It looked terrible. Kan Hyun did not close the door. The sister blames herself because she thought he had already matured. They start with cleaning, check stocks, find canned food and noodles. Sitting at dinner, the sister reads the news, watching the smartphone screen. The phone flashes, the video "Real Goblin Killer" is gaining views. Personnel show Kan Hyun with a bloodied axe and fights with a hobgoblin. Comments are divided by the audience. A skittle hero or a psychiatric hospital. Kan Hyun is delighted with himself. The sister tiredly leafs through the tape, looks at his villainous face on the screen. The light goes out. Kan Hyun goes to bed. The muscles tremble with fatigue. Consciousness counts the past stages, recalls Hobgoblin and the mysterious associate in the gas mask. He sets a goal, to get to the 8th level and become the strongest awakened. Closes his eyes, the image of a beautiful succubus in short death pops up in front of him. Kan Hyun woke up as if inside a dream. A goblin suddenly appeared in front of him. He did not have time to comprehend how reflexively hit the creature in the face. The goblin flew away, leaving behind only heavy breathing and silence. Damn, almost got a heart attack flashed through his head. He looked around space. A dialogue box appeared on the screen. Conditions: evade the horde of cave goblins, clean the dungeon. Conditions of failure: death, tip. Cave goblins have poor vision, but excellent hearing. Use it. Canyon fell silent sharply. New goblins crawled out of the shadows, dozens. He whispered to himself why the warning appeared only now. They surrounded him. He frantically thought to move silently, distract, come up with something. The pulse beat in temples. Why the learning scene has changed, he was perplexed. He shouted from tension, and the echo swept everywhere. He died again. Meanwhile, in another corner of the city, the woman fell on the asphalt. Someone hit her. The man in the room beat everyone around. He had power, but there was no restraint. People screamed in panic. Why he, who has not even completed, can be stronger than the awakened? What is the difference in strength if you do not know how to use it? He answered. Canyon appeared on the screens more and more often. Commentators, analysts, random passers-by, everyone talked about him. He thought it was interesting. It seems that there are still enough entertaining users, and one of them is not at all the same as it seems at first glance. Stage 5, Round 3 begins. The goal is to reveal and eliminate the double among the survivors. The monster is disguised as a person during the day, and at night devours random victims. Failure means instant death of the entire group and restart the cycle. System Council. Paladins and mages have a one-time daytime skill. Kan Hyun recalls the hunt for the succubus and decides to apply the logic of the mafia. He collects people in a circle, prohibits any movements, and expects a reaction. The stunned crowd freezes. The tension thickens with the evening shadows. Soon his own haste turns against him. The voice of suspicion changes the goal. They choose exactly the one who gave orders louder. Kan Hyun dies, finding himself at home at the next awakening. He realizes that a month and a half in a row repeats the same strategic failure. The head is buzzing with insomnia. Victory requires more cunning than gross power. The stomach aches from hunger. Thoughts about food become the last thread to reality. Kan stood in a new, obviously small clothes with sticking shoulders and ridiculously sitting glasses. He tried to change his appearance, hoping that external changes would affect the internal ones. In his hands, he held a book with the screaming name, Wake Up His Brain, the cover of which he held upside down. His behavior caused a mixture of surprise, irritation, and fatigue in his sister. The sister has just returned from work and ran into another eccentric experiment of her brother. She did not hide irritation. Looking at him, she wondered why all these strange dressings, stupid speech, and cheap tricks are needed at all. Glasses, suit, book, everything looked like a failure theatrical number. Her indignation intensified when she realized that money was spent on this that could go to the necessary things. Food, rent, elementary needs. Meanwhile, the fifth stage began again. The essence remained the same. It was necessary to prove wisdom, sufficient to overcome any obstacles. Kan Yun was in a cave full of dusk and echo. Another dialogue box appeared before my eyes. The task seemed mocking. It was required to completely clean the dungeon, where creatures were hidden G rank. The incubator and the most dangerous of them are a spitting tarantula. The level of this monster was the 20th, and it could only be defeated by the exact knowledge of its weaknesses and a verified strategy. The cave was lit by torches, whose flame trembled with air movement. Somewhere in the dark, a grinding, hoarse sound was heard. Kam Hyung knew that he had only one chance to understand where the creature has a vulnerable place and choose the right path. It would seem that the task sounded too simple: to clean the dungeon. Kanhen even grinned. How can the conditions be so straightforward? He moved forward without hesitation, confident that he finally found a solution that would not have occurred to even Aristotle. He struck without fear, without analysis, with one thought: to break through by force. But when the tarantula, a pluming tarantula, fell into him with saliva, he realized that he had underestimated the enemy. His hands began to burn. This is poison. Too strong creature, but to retreat was not in his style. Despite the pain, Kanhin jumped under the belly of a spider. The hint in his memory flashed: weaknesses in the incubator. Doesn't matter. He squeezed his weapons and, investing all rage, cut the monster from below in half. Logic, hints, and strategies are all good, but sometimes the most direct path is the only worker. He decided not to look for the key to the door, but simply break it, and won. A notification surfaced before my eyes. Congratulations! You have passed the 5th stage. Award, giant power. Kanhen triumphed. The thought sounded in his head. The mind is for those who have a weak body. The strength of the giant is a magical ability that enhances muscles. Increases force by 12 units over 10 minutes. Current status, name, Kanhan, title, unshakable, level, 25, strength, 20.1, dexterity, 19.1, endurance, 19.1, magic, 19.1. Additional glasses, 0, unique ability, resurrection, combat skills, sword ownership, basic technique of shield, crossbow. The skill of Lion's Rage, intermediate physical regeneration, 1 blow, 2.5, the strength of the giant. The 5th stage was behind, but the anticipation of the next battle was already burning in Kanhen's eyes. Morning of the real world. There is a breakdown of strength from training in the air. The conversation about the birthday of birth and fatigue sounds after the 1st stage passed. The 1st stage was as difficult as the rumors warned. Further advice is almost absent, starting from the 5th test. It is believed that the 4th line opens the way to the upper percentage of the best. Hidden information about the stages causes a wave of speculation and rumors. The network discussed that someone has already passed the 7th and is going to the 8th. The theme of the 4th test is associated with leadership through force. The 5th stage is associated with wisdom, but interpreted as muscles. The 6th test is called villainy, destroy everything around. The 7th is associated with devotion, where only enemies beat. Commentators laugh and do not believe any plum. Kanhen is angry, shares strategies, and he is taken as a troll. The sister reproaches. He is 4 months against instant geniuses is an abyss. He raves he went through the 6th and 7th levels for 1 attempt. Twilight thickened. The house is filled with intense silence. The system is activated. Training recognizes the completion of the 7th test. An invitation to the final 8th stage flashes on the screen. The reward for the 6th stage is the long sword of Belgan. This is a weapon belonging to a mercenary with 30-year experience of battles. At first the sword was just good, but absorbing the blood of the enemies of Belgan, he was saturated with an ominous aura. The sword has the ability of Berserk, which increases the strength of the owner. The reward for the 7th stage is Ronald's armor, belonging to the wandering knight of the kingdom of Alai. These armor are endowed with a self-healing function that automatically repairs damaged areas after multiple damage. Kanhen thought that if he successfully passes the 8th stage, he could use the weapon and armor in the real world through the inventory. He was also going to check the item that fell out of the hobgoblin. Welcome to training, the system sounded, confirming the completion of the 7th stage. Although Kanhen did not expect to go through the final stage on the 1st attempt, he hoped that this would not take more than a week. The question of the system is, what are your beliefs? Surprised him, forcing him to think. Suddenly the ceiling began to crack, and the space under his feet began to fall apart. The floor was destroyed, and Kanhen screamed into the abyss, covered by panic. He woke up in reality and looked carefully. He was at a pedestrian crossing where a traffic light was burning behind. Suddenly a girl crashed into him, who seemed to have just passed through him. This caused him surprise. Was he really in a formless state? He first saw the city, as if in training. But people around, they were not people. Their faces resembled goblins, although they looked, dressed, and behaved like ordinary people. Kan Yun carefully studied the nearest monster and met his gaze. He looked at him with madness, but maybe not at him. A dragon and some other terrible monster suddenly appeared behind. Kan Yun turned around and saw that half-boom Podlagobans were carrying on him, who immediately ran away, and behind them, many creatures, both acquaintances and unfamiliar. It was something completely different in level than what he experienced in the dungeon a couple of months ago. The scene resembled the apocalypse. The message flashed in the corner of the screen. The time remaining until a complete connection with the measurement of Haxa is 4 years, 278 days. This is how the Earth will look in 5 years. He stood in the middle of the street and watched what was happening around. Suddenly, someone huge appeared behind. Turning around, he saw a giant monster, which was above skyscrapers. Frightened, he screamed when the massive leg of the monster began to fall on him, and suddenly he disappeared. He woke up in a white room, not understanding what was happening. what it was. Also a monster. He felt as if he was just soaring in the air, whether it was God or something else. A creature arose in front of him, who answered that he could think of him as a certain administrator of measurements. The administrator was surprised at Kang Hyun and said that at this stage they would have a personal conversation. He suggested not to be shy and ask any questions, because this is a valuable time for himself to find out something new. Kang Hyun thought about what he saw. Does the Earth really become like that in 5 years? The administrator replied that a lot depends on the actions of people. When Kang Hyun expressed a misunderstanding why the administrator, being a great creature, would not stop this situation, he explained. He is only an administrator, not a guard. Its task is to maintain a balance, and the state window and training are the maximum that it can offer. Then the administrator asked if he could ask a question, and Kang Hyun agreed. The administrator began with the question of what convictions Kang Hyun was guided and for which he still lived. Kang Hyun admitted that the question was deep and was surprised why they were asked. The administrator explained that after observing people during this event, he became curious. All reasonable creatures are interesting, but especially people. The administrator complained that this topic burdened him greatly, to which Kang Hyun replied that perhaps he simply watched enough. Indeed, in his environment, no one thinks about such things. They just fight for a little happiness and survive the day after the day. When the administrator asked if Kang Hyun had something that he wants to protect, he called his rude younger sister and parents his family. When asked if he had ever thought to become a hero, Kang Hyun reacted skeptically. Considering that being a hero is too complicated and an exhausting task, and that this needs a natural talent that he does not have. The administrator, in turn, admitted that he is a fan of Kang Hyun and is pleased to observe his training. Kang Hyun doubted whether the administrator was a sadist, given the test. Then he asked why at the 5th stage, where the main topic is wisdom, the task changes every time. The administrator thought, and then said that time had passed. He said goodbye to Kang Hyun, expressing the pleasure of the conversation. Kang Hyun, in confusion, looked at the window that appeared in front of him with the inscription about the passage of the 8th stage and the beginning of the new path. He tried to say something, but the administrator continued that new trials were waiting for him ahead, and he believes that Kang Hyun would become a hero who would save the world. Kang Hyun, irritated, tried to object, accusing the system of manipulations, especially in relation to the 5th stage. Suddenly, he disappeared, dissolving in the air, leaving behind only the administrator. He said with a smile that he was looking forward to continuing and noted that Kang Hyun became 62nd, who graduated from training, receiving the title of Graduate of Training. Kang Hyun was in his room and tried to scream, coding to the administrator, but found that he had something in his mouth, a toe. Nearby was a sister who explained that she had expected his scream and closed her mouth in advance so as not to create noise. He reproached her for putting such things into his mouth. She suggested that he had failed again, asking how much time it would take to pass. Kang Hyun, with irony, caused the system window, showing the power that he received, and claimed that he had now become a capable person. The sister approvingly wished him to make money and reminded him of the breakfast she cooked. He hinted that he deserves at least congratulations, for which he received a spoon in the face. The sink shone with cleanliness, the dishes were removed, and the sister left. Kang Hyun was left alone thinking, looking at the dialogue box. He analyzed the resulting title, Graduate of Training, and its effect. An increase in all the remnants, +2, although the effect is not too big. He remembered that the titles should not be folded except for the chosen. The rest are used only by half. With its current characteristics, level 28, strength 21 +2, dexterity 19 +2, he realized that, despite the title, much is still ahead. Kang Hyun applied the title, A Graduate of Learning. His name lit up in the system. Level 28, strength 21, with an increase of 2.5, dexterity 19, endurance 20, magic 20, additional stats were absent. Among the skills were the unique ability of resurrection, an intermediate possession of a sword, the technique of owning a shield and a crossbow, the skill of Lion's Rage, intermediate physical regeneration, and the strength of the giant. The damage of one blow was 2.5. With a smile and anticipation, Kang Hyun thought that he had been waiting for this moment for a long time. Finally, he was ready for new trials. Kang Hyun opened the box and saw a mysterious book, a reward for the victory over the hobgoblin. The name of the book said, Expand Your True Essence, Magic Explosion. It was a book of skills that allows you to master the skill of a shot with a magical sphere with explosive force. He exclaimed excitedly. After long training months, Kanyun finally learned to control his screams using a soundless regime. When the system proposed to study the skill, he agreed without hesitation. The book lit up, confirming the receipt of a new skill. Now, when loot was sorted, Kan Hyun wondered whether to apply to the School of Learning awakened in order to develop his abilities further. It was early morning. The city has already woken up. An Mian, recently appointed by a civil servant, first went to work in the School of Teaching awakened. This is a place where people who have completed training had to receive an official certificate. The system became increasingly developed and recognized, and its effectiveness was largely explained by the fact that a similar structure already existed before. Despite the fact that these beginners were just starting the path, they were considered future defenders, and therefore observation of them was extremely important. There were lines in the building. At some point, one of the employees of the registration service began to cry. She said something to the young man, who looked at her bewildered. The girl hid her face behind the leaf and continued to sob. This quickly attracted the attention of others. In the crowd, they began to discuss whether he threatened her. Someone took out the phone and turned on the camera. The guy himself looked puzzled and tried to explain that he did nothing. An instructor, a man named Kim, approached the situation. He carefully examined what was happening. I appreciated the situation and drew attention to the guy standing in front of the registration table. The inspector came closer and peered into the face of Kan Hyun. The moment of recognition slipped between them. The voice and facial features were familiar. However, the appearance of the young man was clearly different from the photograph in the document. Kan Hyung immediately explained that the changes are caused by the action of the skill, and if necessary, he is ready to confirm his identity with the help of fingerprints or DNA analysis. The employee nodded but asked a new question, whether he had trained to the 5th stage. Kan Hyun answered in the affirmative, mentally noting that he preferred not to advertise his real progress so as not to cause suspicion. Nevertheless, even the indicated level was too high, the 12th, despite the attempt to hide real power. Then the question of illegal raids followed. Kan Hyun admitted that before the law entered into force, he went into the dungeon several times. The inspector noted this and continued. He was interested in the unique ability designated in the system as male power. Kan Hyun explained that she temporarily doubles his physical strength. Thanking for the answers, the inspector demanded evidence. He wanted to see all the awards received at the stages. Skill from the 3rd, an artifact from the 4th, and another skill from the 5th. Kan Hyun grinned mentally. Too meticulous official got caught. He held out his hand and bit himself sharply. Blood flowed to the floor, leaving a mark. After a second, the skin dragged on, and the wound completely disappeared, a demonstration of the skill of self-healing. Then he showed a ring that restrainedly shining with a magic aura. It was an artifact of the 4th stage, a ring of reason. When it came to a reward from the 5th stage, Kan Hyung hesitated a little. This skill was much more powerful, and revealing it in the crowd was not the best idea. Kan Hyun explained that the ability obtained at the 5th stage was not just an ordinary skill, but its unique ability. He transformed the power of giants into a skill that inspires fear of opponents with the help of a loud scream. Given its destructive potential, it was quite risky to use it in a crowded place. But the inspector gave permission, and Kan Hyun began without hesitation. The crowd first stood calmly, not understanding what to expect. One of the men recognized Kenyon, the murderer of the goblins, and his face was distorted in surprise. Before he could say something, the air shuddered with a scream. A wave of sound flashed through the hall, causing unconscious horror. People in a panic grabbed their heads, clamped their ears. Some instinctively retreated back. The scream was not just loud, he resonated with something primitive in the mind of everyone, inspiring animal fear. The inspector also closed his ears, slightly leaning from pressure. When everything was subsided, he barely nodded, barely catching his breath, and confirmed that there were enough demonstrations. He pointed to Kanyon to the path, to go to the 2nd building, to the Hanmu building, to the 2nd floor. Kanyon moved forward, and the man from the crowd still looked after him with an empty, stupid expression on his face. Previously, Kanyon was almost refused due to the fact that he looked different than in the photograph in the identity certificate. But when he drew attention to himself using a rivet, the situation has changed. Students sitting nearby quietly whispered. His loud cry at the woman caused her tears, and Kan Hyun realized that perhaps he was not to their liking. Despite this, he believed that what was happening is not too important. Behind Kan Hyun, at the desk, that guy from the crowd was sitting. The teacher introduced himself as Kim Nyeon, who will work in a dreaming branch of the Awakened School. Students applauded. The training was planned for 10 days, in the morning, theoretical classes, and in the afternoon, practical. Food and accommodation were provided in place. If there were no serious problems, everyone could safely complete the course and get a certificate. The teacher recalled that less than 6 months have passed since global changes in the world, and every day brought new information about dungeons and monsters. Tactics and strategies were constantly changing, so what they are now studying cannot be considered absolute truth. He emphasized that he would only be taught what is necessary for survival, because knowledge can become obsolete or become useless tomorrow. Over the next 10 days, the teacher with enthusiasm promised students fruitful work. The first lesson ended, and everyone was given a 10-minute break. Students parted on their business, and Kimin, looking at the ceiling, felt unbearable boredom. He compared the lesson with psychological training in the reserve army. He was sure that the coming 10 days would be unbearable. Suddenly, a muscular man came up to him and held out his hand for acquaintance. His name was Gvok Suil. Kim Hyun was surprised to notice his powerful physique and mentally described the man as a muscular pig. Nevertheless, he answered the greeting and introduced himself as Kan Hyun, shaking his hand to the interlocutor. Gvok Suil asked to take care of him, although in fact, he thought that it was better to put such a person from the very beginning. He was annoyed that this guy from the first minutes creates a commotion because of the little things. However, Kim Hyun did not understand how this guy could behave so confidently at his hand-to-hand party. Kanhin recalled his unique ability, the strength of the giant, which enhanced the muscles with the help of magical energy, increasing the force by 12 points over 10 minutes. To check this, Kimin squeezed the opponent's hand with all his strength. Despite all his investments in the development of strength, the big man realized that he was losing. A lot of students gathered around, observing a stressful confrontation. Kim Hyun could not retreat and look weak, which made his muscles swell tensely. His hand literally exploded and the blood sprayed others. This unexpected turn aroused surprise among the students and admiration for the guy who watched Kanhen all the time. The ambulance rushed to the call, while Kanhen tried to explain what had happened. He insisted that the muscular man came first, wanted to meet, but suddenly his hand burst, a fact that was difficult to believe. Kanhen noted that thanks to the unique ability of the giant power, which increases force 1.5 times, he escaped serious injuries. If not for her, everything could have ended much worse. He listened with doubtfully, mentioning that he had heard of the ability male power, which doubles strength and does not increase it 1.5 times. Kanhen did not argue, admitting that he might confuse the numbers. As a result, the inspector advised him to return to the classroom, and Kanhen sighed with relief, sitting down at his desk. The first day was very tiring for him. At that moment, a guy who used to watch him came to him and asked if it was possible to sit next to him. Kan Hyun agreed without much enthusiasm, mentally calling the muscular man a pig and the new interlocutor Frika. Yusin introduced himself and Kan Hyun reciprocated. Junsun even asked whether it was possible to contact him as a brother. Jun said that he was only 18, but he had already completed his studies thanks to the rapid education in high school. The guy asked to contact him without formalities. Judging by the behavior of Kanyon, Yusan suggested that the very senior here and asked how he achieved such a result. Kanyon explained that the hand of that muscular man exploded by itself, and this was due to an incredible skill. In his thoughts, he called Yusun a freak. He repeated that the situation was not entirely clear, and the hand of the muscular pig literally exploded. At this moment, the teacher entered the classroom and announced the beginning of the second lesson. Due to the delay, the time will be devoted to the main aspects. The teacher began to explain that the dungeons were divided into 2 types, ordinary and incomplete. He continued to explain the classification of the dungeons. Conventional dungeons are the most common, usually open 4 weeks after the appearance. The discovery meant the moment when monsters begin to leave the dungeon. Incomplete dungeons differed in that the time of their opening could not be predicted. It could happen earlier or later than 4 weeks, so it was always necessary to be on a guard. To prevent the opening of the dungeon, there were 2 ways. Stripping the central nucleus or periodic removal of ordinary nuclei to postpone the opening, but it was necessary to carefully observe the order of attacks on the nuclei. There was a skeptical voice in the hall. Someone expressed dissatisfaction and asked if there was something else important to fight monsters. Kanhyun noted that such pitching is a real problem. The teacher warned that the creation of problems would be an exception, but stopped the guard. The pitching not wanting to obey caused a conflict, expressing pride and challenge. The teacher, calmly looking at the phone, proposed a test. He will dodge and block the attacks of the pitching for 1 minute. If the roll can at least touch him, then the course will take. If not, it will be excluded. Kanyun and Yusin carefully watched what was happening. The second pitch was irritated by his impudence, but the situation looked funny, so both could not look away. The instructor, he hit the timer for 1 minute. The pitching, pulling the sword out of the inventory, with a challenge asked who they are taking it for. The guard was surprised to note that he had a real sword, but the teacher was confident in his abilities and straightened his glasses. The rocking, full of anger, shouted about the beginning of the battle and went on the attack. However, the teacher cleverly retreated, and the stroke rushed forward, losing his balance. The teacher noted that the warning attacks are meaningless, and the surprise is the basis of a real attack. The pitch was irritated by his failure and anger that the situation turned against him. The pitching continued to strike, more and more annoyed from the mistakes. The teacher explained that large preparatory movements in the attack are a mistake, because the enemy will not wait until you strike. He emphasized the importance of observing and understanding the movements of the enemy so as not to miss the moment for the counterattack. The pitching, blushing with anger and failures, rushed to attack with a strong blow, but the teacher easily dodged. Explaining that attacks with all their strength create large movements in vulnerable places, the teacher noticed that this approach quickly tires the fighter. Now the instructor has inflicted only one blow with his foot. As a result, the sword of pitch flew out of his hand and pierced the wall. The timer on the teacher's phone showed that time was leaving. All students in the audience were surprised. Kanhen carefully monitored what was happening. He had previously seen such a video on which a professional boxer dodges an ordinary person's blows. But to be able to do it against a capable person, is there really such a difference even among the awakened ones? The speed of the reaction that he had just demonstrated, even raising his indicators to him, would be difficult to keep track of him. Kanhen looked at the Soyan. He looked like a crazy person. He thought to be worth it. Let him sit nearby. The training plan of the School of Preparation of the Awakened included morning theoretical classes and practical training in the afternoon. Today's practice was devoted to the development of weapons ownership technology. The teacher explained that the weapon needs to be taken in turn. At first, everyone trains independently, and the instructor's assistants take turns correcting mistakes. Due to the lack of staff, individual classes were impossible. Kim took a sword, and Jun's offered to practice together, noting that the development of skills seems boring. Kunhyun agreed, but the teacher recalled that sparring is prohibited until the 6th day of training, which upset Kanhyun. All students trained blows with swords in the air, and Kanhyun watched them. He did not expect much, but was surprised how much the level of everyone was lower than he thought. Practice seemed superfluous to him. It is better to immediately work out real blows. Taking the sword in his hands, he began to independently work out movements. The teacher Kim noticed this and carefully watched the blows of Kanhyun. The assistant teacher made a remark. He advised to move his legs a little and change the angle of inclination of the sword in the rack. He noted that the manner of Kanhyuna looks too spectacular, but in real battles, such tricks can be useless. Kan Hyong was indignant. He believed that it was in the dungeons, in real battles, the skills of owning a sword are very important. In a fit of emotions, he grabbed the assistant by the scruff of the scruff and offered to test his strength in the duel. The assistant reluctantly agreed, deciding to tolerate so as not to complicate his life. Suddenly, the teacher's voice interrupted the training. The assistant instructor, Kim, asked for a word for a minute. The instructor, patting his hands, turned to everyone. Demonstration sparring began between Kan Hyun and Kim Sung-ham. All glances rushed at them. The assistant instructor had to follow the instructions and Kan Hyun would continue to wave the sword as usual. They were allowed to conduct only one exchange of blows. The assistant was surprised, but Kan Hyun was ready. The teacher gave the team, and two fighters rushed towards each other. Kan Hyun, confidently holding the sword in his hands, attacked the instructor assistant. Their blades collided in a swift duel. Suddenly, the assistant's sword slipped out of his hands and pierced the ground. The assistant was on the ground, and Kan Hyun stood above him, looking at him from above. All those present watched this scene with surprise and tension. The teacher emphasized that training skills are aimed at preparing for a real battle. He noted that the most important is the ability to respond to attacks in time and not blindly following the techniques studied. It was this moment that Kang-hyun demonstrated his action. After that, the teacher invited everyone to attach the participants for an impressive demonstration. Kang-hyun remained confused, observing the reaction of others. The teacher helped the assistant Kim Song-ham arise and apologized for taking on an unfavorable role. The assistant with gratitude admitted that he received valuable experience, albeit unexpectedly. Kang-hyun, in a conversation with Jun-seon, tried to comprehend what he saw, while the teacher carefully followed them. He reflected on the goals of sparring. He just wanted to check something. The assistant remained at a loss from what happened. My expensive training diary, Kang-hyun wrote. The first day began with a conflict. One pumped guy decided to assert himself, but quickly received a lesson. A guy named Yunsun behaves friendly, but it seems a little crazy. Theoretical classes were boring, but almost not very useful. In the morning of the second day, again there was a theoretical lesson, already about tactics. After lunch, they continued training with weapons. Yunsun seems very excited. I better stay from him at a distance. The third day, Juns continues to play the role of an annoying companion. He answers questions about his own experience evasively, creating the feeling that he hides more than he says. The fourth day, the mood worsened. Repetition of the same one causes depression. Rules, restrictions, instructions. All this begins to crush. There is a feeling that they are not taught to survive here, but accustomed to obey. The fifth day, physical and mental exhaustion is felt more and more. Most of the time, I just wanted to close my eyes and disappear. The body itself sank to the floor. The sword fell out of the hands. The only answer was a silent stay in a state, meditation or indifference. The sixth day, everything is repeated. Every day it merges with the previous one. Hope fades away for changes. Kang-hyun was sitting next to Junseon. He, without hiding irritation, said that it would be nice if he had arranged some kind of trouble. Although before that, he said that they should behave well in order to calmly finish the course. According to him, if Yunsun is expelled, this will not be his problem. In response, Juns calmly remarked that Kang-hyun had a striking talent to say knuckles with such indifference, as if this was a simple statement of fact. Juns recalled that today is the sixth day of the course, so official sparring begin in the afternoon. He added that he has a premonition. There will be something interesting ahead. Intuition, according to him, rarely fails it. Day 6, afternoon training. Kang-hyun climbed the platform. Talking quickly subsided in the hall. By the 6th day, everyone already knew that the guy was capable of surprises modestly. His rival was appointed a strong young man with a sword. The steel of the tip gleamed in the light of the lamps. Kang-hyun also had a sword. One soft movement, and the blade of its sword lay down, blocking the blow with amazing accuracy. The blade clicked, knocking the sword out of the hands. All this took less than 3 seconds. The teacher did not have to intervene. The guy fell to the floor, recognizing the defeat. Kang-hyun won. For a second, silence again hung in the hall, and then the turn passed to the next pair, and the noise of the workshop returned. It seemed to Kang-hyun that this was just a children's game. The level was not so high. Sparring lasted until 8 a.m. Do these people should continue to engage in this boring nonsense? 2 guys fought on the stage. When attacking, the blade stopped a millimeter from the enemy's eyes. Kim stopped the duel. Kang-hyun believed that he was good and would like to fight only with him. Yusan was the following. Kang-hyun hoped that he would not create problems. He had a bad feeling. Well, when there is an instructor there, nothing terrible should happen. This is true, Kang-hyun thought. The instructor announced that Lee Yuri-mage would use personal weapons instead of a training, and this is her advantage. Yunan did not mind, although he had had a sword before. Now he chose a mace. The rules do not prohibit changing weapons. The instructor gave the command to retreat, then counted to 3, and the duel began between Juns and Lee Yuri. The enemy of Juns attacked Magic, moving forward with a spear, and Junsun blocked her with a mace with a smile. Everyone in the hall was shocked by Magic, which was first seen live, including Kang-hyun. Kang-hyun thought that magic could be studied depending on success, and wondered about training. The girl inflicted another magic blow, but Junsan created a pink protective field around him. Junsan responded to Balava, and Kang-hyun carefully followed the progress of the battle and the magic of Juns. The teacher watched Junsan, fearing the girl's attack in a violet radiance approaching him. Juns used the trajectory of magic, aiming at the instructor. Suddenly, splashes of blood spilled. The teacher was horrified, and a bloodied girl lay on the floor. Juns raised his hand, defeating. His whole face was flooded with blood, And Kanyan realized that Yusin was much more crazy than he thought. The ambulance arrived and took the victim. She had an open fracture of her right hand. Juns only claimed that this was a mistake. Such cases are possible during sparring. Kim did not believe him. Kanhen recognized the blade in the hands of Kim. He already saw him. Sparring lasted another 2 days. Despite the incident, in a careful attitude towards Yunzon, Juns continued his training, but the teachers watched him with suspicion and caution. The victories on the penalty became noticeably larger, and the doctor was always ready in training. They said that the salary of the doctor was high enough, which reflected the seriousness of training. The 8th day passed without serious incidents. The atmosphere was unusually calm and even. In the office of the instructor, Kim, Kanhyun suggested arranging a duel on real swords before graduation. The teacher grinned and advised Kanhyun to calmly take the course, given the load on him. 2 days remained. He also strictly forbidden to enter the office without warning, emphasizing the importance of order. Kanhyun thought, looking at the teacher, and expressed his dissatisfaction with the boredom of training. He recalled that he had already met with the teacher and suspected that he was also tired of the routine. The teacher was silent, but recognized Kanhyun and thanked for his help in preventing destruction earlier. The teacher asked about the progress of the cadet, mentioning the 5th and 6th levels, and appreciated his sword. Kanhyun was justified that he found the sword during the cleansing, to which the teacher reacted skeptically. He took out his sword from the inventory and offered to sparring, demonstrating the seriousness of intentions. At that moment, Kanhyun was surprised, not expecting such a proposal against the background of a previous conversation. The battle began. A teacher appeared behind Kanhyun and tried to strike. Kanhyun noticed the attack in time, turned around and waved his sword. The teacher noted the dexterity of Kanhyun, not just power. Kanhyun said that recovery skills allow him not to be afraid of strong attacks. He began to strike, demonstrating incredible physical strength. Sparring became more aggressive. Kanhyun created a gap in defense of the opponent. The teacher wounded Kanhyun on the arm. He could not leave. Kanhyun caught the opponent's blade with his bones. The teacher was surprised, and Kanhyun said he caught him. Kanhyun laughed. The teacher tried to pull out the sword. Their views met. Suddenly, Kim fell to the ground, and Kanhyun stood above him. Kim was thinking about his defeat. On the table lay a heating pad. The teacher was sitting next to Kanhyun, recognizing his strength. They drank drinks in a friendly atmosphere. Kanhyun said that sparring was a draw due to agreement not to use skills. He proposed to believe that Kim won. Kim warned that then, Kanhyun could be excluded for violation of the rules. Kanhyun objected that a passive skill cannot be controlled. Kim thought, then thanked Kanhyun and wished to relax. Tomorrow was planned for the study of the dungeons. Near the gate there was a man in a mantle. The gate was surrounded by barbed wire and warning signs. He stepped over the barrier and became invisible, dissolving in the air. Approaching the gates, he pulled the ring and went inside. The door behind him closed. There was nobody around him. No one noticed his actions. This place is the school dungeon of the school, the rank of F, called the Gake Forest. The students stood in front of the gates with an instructor and assistants. Monsters' gakes here are stronger than in the usual dungeons of the rank F. The first reason for the choice is the type of dungeon, filled with traps but without other threats. The second, where the monsters do not get into the packs, they can be lured one by one. Details will be given already inside, said the instructor Kim. The assistants began to open the gate. This is his first entrance to the real dungeon, Kanhyun thought. Previously, he did not pass through such doors. He felt a slight feeling of levitation, and another world opened before my eyes. Kanhyun examined the dungeon, thinking whether this is really the same place. He thought about the portal through which they passed, considering it just a door. It occurred to him that perhaps, if you go back, it would be possible to leave the dungeon. Yusin recalled an explanation from the class, which said that a return was possible. The idea that he could be considered crazy caused irritation. He decided to stop the dialogue and focus on what is happening. Juns was perceived nearby as an obsessive presence. He recalled that Kanhan first spoke to him. The assistant was to be the first to lure the Gake and conduct a demonstration. After this, the teams of 5 people had to act independently. Each group had to lure and fight with one monster separately. Gake is a bird-type monster. Growth from head to toe 2 meters is similar to an ostrich. Distinctive features are fast legs and strong beak. The attack can break through the plate armor. Special caution is required. The strategy to surround it with several people and tie their legs. Kim noticed a systemic notification that the central core of the dungeon was deleted. Next, there was a message that the portal had opened out. All participants surfaced a warning dialogue box. It reported that the dungeon would soon collapse and everyone needs to leave it. The sky above the forest of gate cracked into sharp fragments. The air trembled. Kim urged everyone to go to the portal one at a time, forbidding tin and panic. The students lined up in a chain while the gates flickered with a ghostly light. Amazement grew. The central core was deleted. Why anxiety? What is happening at all? Almost everyone left the gates. Outside, a blue fire flew out, stitched by blood-red lightning. Kim realized that a breakthrough of the dungeon began and caused support. Assistants evacuated interns. The breakthrough means that the core is destroyed without the murder of a boss monster. The destruction of the dungeon will push the remaining creatures through the portal. Kanyun felt the tension of the battle and prepared for an unforeseen battle. Kim looked at the portal. Bright light and puffs of smoke breaks out of it. This is a breakthrough of the dungeon. Kanyun approached Kim. Kim points to the portal. Kanyun clenches his fists. He understands that this is not a training. Kim counts on him. Gallic monsters appear from the vault. Their bodies wriggle. Their eyes burn with bloodthirsty light. Kim unfolds to the cadets and waves his hand, calling them to build. Kanyun is alone. His breathing goes astray. He looks at the hordes of monsters. Gakes rush forward. Kanyun abruptly breaks down and rushes towards. From behind Kanyun, Juns with a mace appears. He strikes the first Gake. The creature falls dead. Jun smiles, his eyes burn with a fighting excitement. Kanyun is shocked by what is happening. He notices how easily Yunso is fighting. Juns fights with excitement. His face shines like a fight is a holiday. It annoys Kanhen. Juns waves Bulava and shouts something funny. Kanhen gritted his teeth and looks with annoyance. He thinks how much he hates what is happening. But he takes out the sword and goes forward. A strange sense of confidence appears near Yusen. Crazy nearby is already not bad. Kanhen waving a sword, striking the gates. He moves faster. He warns Yunsen. He nods and covers his ears. Kanhen activates the skill. Lion rights fill the air. Gakes hurt. The sound presses on the mind. Kanhen screams, calling the monsters to be curlin-headed. The echo diverges through the dungeon. The morale of enemies falls. Their movements become lethargic. Kim notices the strange. The monsters are weakening, as if they had a spell on them. He looks around, trying to understand where the effect came from. Cadets whisper. Someone calls the name Kanhen. Everyone looks at him. Kim guesses that this is a massly debuff. He is amazed. He first sees the cadet to use something similar. He believes that help is already close, and you can do without sacrifice. But Kanhen has a different thought in his head. He thinks about a magic explosion, skill that does not belong to others. He can use it as if he is his personal. The rest are not. Juns looks with enthusiasm and asks something. Kanhen responds briefly. He calls it a secret. The face remains serious. Kanhen notices something in the sand. His gaze clings to huge traces. He calls Yunsen. He turns and both look at one point. A paw appears from the sand, huge with claws like blades. A mutant of Gate comes out of the portal. It is 2 times higher than usual. This is a boss. The monster growls, the sand trembles. Breathing becomes harder. Kim sees him from afar. The face frowns. There is no reinforcement yet. He assesses the situation. The boss went out too early. Junsun stands, squeezing the sword. His heart beats quickly. He sees such a monster for the first time. Juns is silent for a moment. Then his face is illuminated by a wild smile. He points to the boss and takes a step forward. He wants to fight. Kanhen protests. He also wants to fight. Both are charged to the battle. Their blood boils. The boss is approaching. Tomorrow is the ceremony of presenting diplomas. The academy is preparing for the event. Today, during training in the dungeon, an incident occurred. Kim confirms someone penetrated inside. It was no accident. Suspicion falls on a series of attacks in dungeons since last month, the girl thought. The face is serious. She feels the connection between events. She asks if one of the cadets stood out. Kim answers. There were 2. They struck the mutant boss, Gake. The girl is surprised. She asks for details. Kim describes the first: monstrous power, speed, dexterity. It is reckless, but almost invulnerable. Regeneration makes it adamant. The tactics are chaotic, but dangerous for any enemy. The second is the exact opposite: cold, accurate, cruel. The genius of the battle with reflexes on the verge of the impossible. But his cruelty is a frightening flaw. The girl grins. Praise is not in the style of Kim. She is interested in Kim offered them a job. Kim reminds the instructor cannot sell students. The girl calls him stubborn. She smiles, but her voice is hard. She is the leader of the Dagon Guild, Khan Sayan. She asks him to return. Guild needs it. Kim agrees. He also feels something is wrong in this incident. Something is brewing. Tomorrow is a release, but the alarm does not disappear. The ceremony is completed. Graduates diverge. The last words of the director sound solemn. Kan Hyun stands in the hall looking around. He first sees this person. He always thought that Pa Nyan was the head of the school. Only he knew him from the leadership. The director leaves. A man in a suit politely bows and invites him to pass. Kan Hyun is surprised. He did not expect such luxury. Near the exit is a luxury car. Kan Hyun is lost. Juns calls him. He offers to give him home. Kan Hyun is stunned. He jokes that he was born with a golden spoon. He first gets into such a car. He feels not at ease. At that moment, he hears his voice from behind. Someone calls him by name. He turns around. Pa Nyan is suitable. The teacher corrects, his name Kim. Kan Hyun smiles. He thinks he came to say goodbye. Kim explains, this is not a farewell, but a formality. He mentions the award for help in the breakthrough of the dungeon. Kan Hyun is in shock. He wanted to hear something more, at least one word of gratitude. He screams after, reproaching with coldness. But Kim stops. The teacher looks directly at him. His voice becomes serious. He recognizes the power of Kan Hyun. He says they will meet again. Kim reminds, to be strong, not all. Responsibility is more important. Now Kan Hyun is awakened. His path is just beginning. Kan Hyun returns home and tells his sister about his potential. The sister answers without much enthusiasm, but sees the prospect in his brother. Kang Hyung decides to tame his arrogance and plans to pass all the dungeons tomorrow. He asks how to find the entrance and recalls that you need to look for points on the map. Sister mentions the radar application for the Awakened, where they publish data about raids. Kan Hyun jokes about the genius of his sister and understands that you can just look on the network. He used to spend time on the game, and his sister notices that because of this, he seemed to be stupid. The appendix contains dungeons, information about monsters, and an announcement of the set of groups. He notices that the Forest of Gake was then considered the dungeon of the rank F. Kan Hyung is sure that he will cope, and won, but he understands. It is better to assemble the team. He dreams of earn a lot of money and please his mother with expensive gifts. On TV, a reward is announced. For cleaning the rank of F, they give 20 million won. They talk about magic stones as a new source of energy and expensive trophies. The best raiders receive a huge monthly income, and this amazes the father of Kan Hyun. Parents are discussing the eldest son, who has already sent 10 million won to the family. Mother says that he bought a used car and now earns more father. She is nevertheless disturbed by rumors about injuries and deaths in dungeons. The father considers such a risk better than unemployment and believes in the prudence of his son. He recalls that before diving, you need to assemble a proven team. The family agrees that Yun has been distinguished by his mind since childhood and will not act thoughtlessly. In the depths of the caves, blows rattles. Kunyun destroys flushing tarantulas with quick chopping blows. His laughter is given an echo. The battle itself seems to him to be lightweight. The bodies of spiders fall in pieces. The poison hisses on the stones. Outside, nearby stands his Bentley. A brilliant body reflects the dim light of lanterns. The phone vibrates in the back seat. The screen burns a series of continuous challenges. At home, parents discuss their son's silence and decide to call in the morning. Mother goes to wash the dishes. Her father asks to get out in the room and not to raise the alarm, for sure he is already sleeping. They recall the strange gates that opened at the supermarket in their area. They decide to warn Hyun later. The expectation of state assistance stretches endlessly. Meanwhile, goblins and orc warriors fall out of the gate. Their growl is blocked by the noise of the street. A massive boss, green leather, and armor made of rough iron appear at the head of the detachment. The central core of the dungeon was removed, so the portal opened right out. Kanyun completes the raid in one day and goes to the surface, satisfied with rapid progress. He reflects on the following purpose, fluctuates between the cave E rank and caution. The idea of unknown rules of resurrection in reality makes him slow down. He opens the car, dreaming of a dream and tomorrow's dinner with his sister and beef. On the screen, 36 missed from Mahyung. The heart is compressed. He calls back, hears alarmed voice. News about parents and gates. Awareness of danger throws him into his face. Fingers tremble on the Bentley steering wheel. He is in a hurry to the rescue. Urgent news is transmitted to all television channels. The government promises to make every effort to eliminate the threat. The Ministry of Defense in the United Forces of Abilities conducting a breakthrough zone. Citizens are evacuated, but people remain inside. Among them, the parents of Kanhen. The inhabitants of the isolated zone are more and more amenable to panic. The Dengen Guild officially announces participation in a rescue operation. Meanwhile, Kanhen is preparing. The sister looks at him with anxiety. She is not sure that he is to cope alone. He answers with a smile. He went through the preparation. Just wait at home. She does not believe in the ease of the situation, but cannot stop him. She warns him to be careful, not heroic. She behaved restrained, but restless. He tells her not to worry. He will return his parents. Kanhen gets into the car, a concentrated face. He rushes into the breakthrough zone. Kanken's car was stopped at a checkpoint. The military blocked the road and indicated to go back. He presented a certificate of the user of abilities. After a short meeting, he was missed, warning that they were not responsible for the consequences. Kanhyun nodded and drove on, leaving the military behind him. He rushed along the road surrounded by thick trees. The calculations flickered in my head. There were about 2 hours to the target. It was hoped that monsters would not appear along the way. The dungeons continued to open. The situation with E, the rank, caused special concern. A boar suddenly flew out of the forest. His eyes glowed red. He crashed into the car. The glass cracked. The body was angry. The car turned upside down. Kan Hyun got out. Blood flowed from his forehead. He raised his sword. In front of him towered a boar, the size of a truck. But the danger intensified. Dust appeared in the distance. Goblins approached. There were many of them. They were armed with sharp spears. Among them, warriors of large physique were distinguished. The forces were unequal. There was no time left. Kan Hyun assessed the situation. A direct collision meant the loss of time, and the road was more important. He disappeared among the trees. Goblins attacked a boar. A fight began. From the shadow of the forest, Kan Hyun heard his former enemy now fights with new enemies. He did not intervene. It was necessary to move on. The loss of the car did not matter. The family was waiting. The night comes. Konhen makes his way through the dark forest, saving the charge of the phone. He regrets the abbreviated route without lanterns and the illuminated road. Behind the movement is felt, the sword describes the arc, and the invisible wolf falls to the ground. New invisible dystrophians appear. Their white silhouettes flicker between trees. Kanahan chopped them without stopping. Blood soaks the earth and clothes. The battle continues until dawn. The field is strewn with dead gaps, wolves of its growth. With the first rays of the sun, Conan sits on a branch. Fatigue presses. Sleep does not help. An uneven snag is a support, but time is running out. It is preparing on the road. In the house, the mother reads the last message of his son about the imminent arrival. The connection is unstable. The alarm is growing. Near the supermarket yesterday, there was an orc monster from F rank. Parents doubt the safety of shelter. The father hopes for the strength of his son, but doubt sharpens the thought of the new monster. Where did such a terrible creature come from? Kenyon stands wounded in the blood, but with a curve, a tired grin on his face. For him, the orcs were only a winch for his parents, an unbearable expectation. Now he is at home. Kan Hyun proudly stands among the fallen orcs. The bloodied sword shines. A hoarse roar is heard behind. New warriors. Warriors are approaching it. The tablets above their heads indicate the rank of boss. 3 leaders go to the forefront. Kan Hyun understands the mistake. This is not a Festin rank, but much more dangerous of the rank. In the house, parents notice their son through the window and freeze from the shock of his changes. Orcs rush forward. The saliva flows along the fangs, the weapon sparkles. The first orc blade slides past. Kan Hyun's magical blow tears the flesh of the enemy. The second enemy hatches the club, breaking the bone of his hand, but Kan Hyun continues the battle. The steel of the sword cuts off the head one after another. Blood stains the grass underfoot. The last orc has split the skull of a magic explosion. The field occurs mortal silence. The pain in the broken arm is given by pulsation. A new shadow is swirling around. An entire orc army closes the ring. In the center of the construction, the boss general rises. Kan Hyun's muscles strain. Not the time for healing. You need to leave strength to fight the giant. The lion's random roar shakes the air. The moral of enemies stagger for a moment. He lifts the sword into a combat rack. scattering the remnants of fatigue. The orc general puts a fist on Kanhan's face. The blow is strong but does not knock down. A crowd of orcs pushes him back to the leader. Strokes, the game is painful and predatory. Kanhan is falling, magical regeneration runs out. Muscles no longer delay the wounds. Forces are running out, but behind the house and family, it is impossible to retreat. He rises, squeezing the sword. Determination overlaps the pain and crack of bones. The general rushes forward, in the eyes of an ominous fire. The fangs are grinning in anticipation. In the house, the mother sees her son in the window. The father grabs the pipe, preparing to defend herself. A new wave of orcs crawls to the walls. The weapon shines in the twilight. Cannon tries to break through. Steel dissects the flesh. The blood splashes a fan. Several orcs fall. The general's gross palm captures his shoulder and throws him face into a cracked asphalt. The skull rings, the world floats. Dust clogs lungs, but consciousness clings to the target. Forces go out. Pain answers with each breath. Family images flicker before my eyes. Even lying in dust, he is looking for a way to rise. Cannon loses consciousness. Eyes are closed. The body goes limp on broken asphalt. Suddenly, a girl bursts on the battlefield. The leader of the guild, her blow knocks the general orc from his feet. The team of raiders finishes the remaining orcs, completing the cleaning of the territory. Rescuers begin the evacuation of wounded residents, preparing transport for the rest. The damage is huge, but due to the fact that the orcs were collected in one place, there are less destruction than nearby. The raiders find Kanhen, realizing that he alone restrained the enemy before their arrival. One of the rescuers checks the pulse and states death, the order to carefully prepare the body. After a moment, the place where Kanhen lay is empty. The body disappears without a trace. In the shade, Kanhen opens his eyes. His breath is even. Kanhyun wakes up on the same tree where he fell asleep. The system reports the resurrection after 24 hours. The ability returns to life while the Earth is in a crisis. The fine is -1 level and -50% of forces per day. He recalls the attack on parents and orcs. Rage raises the pulse and erases the dream. The body seems led from the fine, but he jumps from the branch and rushes back without sparing himself. A 5-hour run through the pain ends in a hometown turned into scorched ruins. Broken windows, a distorted apartment, a knife sticking out of the floor. The void presses stronger than the wounds. At the military base, he takes the phone. The connection with Aishin brings the news of a severe wound of parents. Father lost his hand, mother in a coma. Hope is mixed with oppressive guilt. 2 months pass. The Dangun Guild cleans the dungeons of the rank on the Hije Plain. Leader Khan Sayan announces the new dungeon of the rank of S. The threat gains strength. The sister is worried. Kanyon was dying 3 times a week, but he is not going to retreat. In the training raid, the team fights with murals. The overall level is growing rapidly. One cadet boasts of achievements and a plan to join Dangun to the 35th level. He calls the rest weak, but notes that his growth is a common merit. An unknown swordsman quickly sweeps along the corridor. Its speed affects the group. The figure rushes straight to the boss hall, ignoring the risk and warnings. The detachment fluctuates, choosing between caution and the need to follow the loner. Kanyon was surrounded by Muralirov warriors, numerous creatures crawling along the walls. At that moment, he activated the Vane's secret skill, received the day before. This skill increased all indicators except mana by 40%, depending on the condition of the body. Wine was a crazy warrior who lived for the sake of battle and gained incredible power at the cost of destroying his own body. When the Muraliers came too close, Kanyon prompted them into pieces with one magic explosion. The group who came for him was shocked by his power. He went to the core of the dungeon, raised it, and stated that he was leaving, demanding to free his way. Despite the questions of the group about the collection of magic crystals from the murdered monsters, Kanhyun refused, focusing on his desire to become stronger. In the conversation between the members of the group, rumors of the mysterious loner surfaced who recently cleaned the dungeons. Although they doubted that someone could cleanse the dungeon E, a rank alone. Meanwhile, the main core was destroyed and the portal opened out. Kanyon, crouching on the corpse of Muravrir, studied the book The Intercession of Muravrir, which gave the skill of strengthening the skin. He understood that the use of wine's secrets and regeneration at the same time requires a lot of mana. And I thought that a skillful combination of skills is the right path. The Bilgan's sword, with a length and strength of 500 out of 500, always accompanied it in wanderings. His special ability, Berserk, gave increased strength and increased strength 1.5 times, but at the same time deprived of the ability to think sensibly. The consequences of this state were unpredictable, and regardless of how powerful this ability was, it could not be used thoughtlessly. Kanyan understood that despite his rush, it was impossible to lose composure. Now it was pointless to regret past mistakes. There was one goal in front of him, at all costs to become stronger. He was determined to master the skill of Berserk and learn to control him in order to extract maximum benefits from him without dangerous consequences. People gathered near the open gate, discussing the latest news about the mysterious loner who allegedly cleans the dungeons. One of the men asked with interest whether it was not the one who was noticed here today. The guy pointed his finger, confirming that it was really a Kante who was leaving the gate. At this moment, the outbreak of cameras blinded his eyes. The reporter from the KST introduced himself and asked to look into the camera, inviting Kanhen to join their guild. But Kanyen did not show interest and sharply demanded to leave, not to interfere with him. And angry to the annoyance of the journalists, he was not shy in words, and after the threat, he forced them to retreat. Passers-by discussed him, believing that he could be a convicted and dangerous person. Approaching his car, the second Bentley, Kanyen unlocked her and thought irritably about how reporters were wasting his time in vain. Suddenly, the voice of a man sounded from behind, who offered help and handed himself a business card. It was a dream of Ian Ho from the Association of Users of Abilities, who had been watching the Konkan for some time. He explained that in the association you can get comprehensive support and did not require an immediate answer. The man bowed and retired, leaving Konyun alone with a visitor in his hands. In his head, the idea of what this organization was an association of users of abilities, and whether it is worth contacting them. Association of Users of Abilities is not at all an ordinary organization. Unlike greedy guilds, it really protects the rights of awakened. Conan never heard them actively recruited someone, so that the proposal to contact them at any time seemed strange to him, but curious. At that moment, he sat and ate noodles, absorbing 5 servings at once. My biggest problem now is mana, he thought. Recently, he spent too much on secret techniques, military tactics, and regeneration, and almost nothing remained for attacking skills. Even the protection of Moravlera seemed a luxury. We need to find good artifacts, he decided, and went to the auction. But there was nothing sensible. There are only cheap things that would have raised stats by only 1 to 2 points. He needed powerful artifacts, better than those that he already had. Suddenly, he stumbled upon information about the Book of the Skills of the Ring, picked up, and where it can be obtained. He learned that in the dungeon Goblin Village in Kanam, you can get rings that increase magical power from 1 to 4 points. To get them, you need to kill shamans or boss. Previously, only a few people who were recruited by the pharmaceutical parties knew the place, but recently some new guys appeared there and seized the territory. The government did not pay attention to this until the monsters went outside. For them, it was just a trifling problem. Kunyun understood, if he wants to survive and become stronger, he will have to do something with it. The site is full of comments about the guild, monopolizing the Goblin Village and eliminating strangers. Kanyen does not see the guards at the gate, opens the portal, and the step with Shag enters the wooded location. 2 men and a girl are sitting in the clearing. They evaluate the guest's equipment and decide to rob him. The first attacker soars into the air, falls unconscious. The foam bubbles at the lips. Kanhyun cuts the enemy's sword with a naked palm and throws 1 blow to the second striker. The girl is trying to hit the back, but the magic explosion discards it. The hand bleeds with blood. Screams echoed between trees. The battle turns into a brutal demonstration of power. Kanhyun remains calm, uses skills as if he is teaching enemies to their own tricks. There are still 7 more on the trail. The faces are full of rage. Steel sparkles in partial shade. They promise that the offender will not leave alive. The threat ring is shrinking around Kanhyun. The tension thickens in front of a new fight. 7 advance, threatening with swords. Their faces were distorted by anger. But Kanyen only grinned, as if it was all nothing more than a joke. He slowly turned around, looked around them with a cold, insightful look. He just needed a guide. The training his life turned upside down. A world of strength, cruelty, and money opened before him. Once he was considered a discharge, and now he headed a large guild, like a tiger who received wings. In the dungeons, he felt invincible. The leader of the enemy group went to him with a threat, but the counterattack was instant. The fist of Kanhyun met the enemy's face. The body collapsed, silence shook the earth. He looked around. The whole seed was already lying unconscious. The leader did not believe how an unarmed enemy laid everyone in a second. Kanyon took out a bloody dagger. The ice was scared in his gaze. He ordered the enemies to be lined up, as if at an interview for the role of a guide, evaluating them as candidates. Plenipotents. Blood flashed on the steel, the tension thickened. The selection began. Kanyon ends the improvised selection of captives in the clearing. A group of wounded raiders is on his knees. The clothes are saturated with blood and dirt. He announces the only suitable, Kim Sona from the Bait Guild. The rest clap with trembling palms, trying to guess his intentions. Kanyon does not believe their repentance. It is easy for them to hide the future deception. The blow with a fist breaks the face of the nearest. The tension in the air thickens. The prisoners lower their heads, fear holds them silent. Kanyon leaves the clearing, leaving behind the defeated and broken. Kim Sona follows him, galling muffledly and trying not to attract excess attention. The dungeon stretched endless corridors. Darkness enveloped every turn, as if hiding something important. The conductor walked ahead, carefully bypassing the monsters, choosing the path carefully and accurately. Kanyon trudged after him, yawning from boredom and looking at the road, as if hoping to see at least the shadow of the enemy. This walk was bored with him. He was angry at the silent darkness, longing for at least some mess. The conductor tried to justify himself, but Kanyon ordered to stop and arrange a halt right here. The fire flared up quickly. The bathroom was fiddling by the fire, cutting something into a metal pot. Kanyon lay under a tree, lazily watching him, and kicked the pebble of the sole boot. The dignity was preparing noodles, throwing seasonings blindly, at the same time glancing at Kanyon's swords. The pot boiled, hot steam rose into the darkness, mixing with the smell of fried meat and noodles. Kanyon came up, took the bowler right from the fire, not frowning that he did not touch his hot steel at all. The sanctuary sat next to him, watching Kanyon eat as if he had seen such a thing for the first time. They ate silently. Tension hung in the air, which could not scatter even the flame of the fire. Kanyon suddenly turned, glanced at the bathroom, as if he had just remembered him. He briefly asked the age, the past, as if he evaluated whether he should have survived. The bathroom answered with restraint 25. His voice trembled, but honesty and fatigue were heard in him. He talked about his studies, work, family, his father's fall and poverty that came for her. Kanyon listened to everything without emotions, then dismissed as if he was brushing an annoying fly. The bathroom was surprised, not understanding why to ask if you are not going to listen to the answer. Kanyon ordered to shut up and finish. There was no sympathy in his tone, only the calculation. They continued dinner, surrounded by darkness and silence, which comes before the storm. Empty pots lay near the fire. Smoldering coals barely illuminated the dark clearing. Kanyon was asleep. His sword lay nearby, like a continuation of his hand. He opened his eyes to the sanctuary, slowly raised himself, and began to listen to the night silence. He looked at the sleeping Kanyon. His lips trembled, his gaze darted between a sword and a forest. Memories flashed in my head. A blow to the face, blood in the mouth, humiliation and fear. The thought flashed quickly. If you kill him now, everything will end. Everything will be different. He clenched his fists, took a step, but immediately stopped, unable to bring the matter to the end. Deciding to escape, he looked back in the darkness and silently headed towards the forest. The voice came suddenly from the darkness, as if the forest itself spoke, breaking silence. He flinched to the bathroom, turned around. His heart was pounding. His face turned white with horror. He tried to answer something, squeezing out of insecure excuses. Kanyon looked at him. His eyes shone in the shade like a beast. The tone was calm, but the threat rang in it. Every word, like a drop of poison. He froze the sanctuary, not knowing what to say, unable to understand whether Kanyon believed him. He nodded, slowly returned to its place. Silence enveloped the clearing again. Only the noise of the wind in the foliage remained. He realized that there will be no second chance, and Kanyon does not joke. The bathroom pointed towards the hill. There the village of Goblin was visible behind the trees. Kanyon stopped, squinted, felt the pulsation of magic in the air. He looked in surprise, not understanding what he was talking about, how to feel it. Kanyon grinned, feeling the weakness of the satellite and his hidden anger. San tried to hide emotions behind a fake smile. Everything was in full swing inside, he knew. Soon everything would end. In the center of the village, Dozens of goblins of different classes accumulated. The magic core attracted them, as the flame attracts moths. San knew that the troops of the village rarely leave the core for no reason. Now all their forces are inside, and the chance to survive is negligible. He did not believe that Kanyun could cope. Goblins raised a scream. One by one jumped out of the huts. The earth trembled underfoot when they ran to the attack. Kanyun stepped forward, stretching the sword from behind. The blade flashed in a dull light. He smiled as if he had met old friends on a slaughterhouse. The backpack took up as if thrown by invisible power. He collapsed exactly on Kankun's head. Kanyun raised an eyebrow, looking up. The sanctuary rushed to the run without looking around. The forest swallowed its silhouette. The branches whipped the face. He shouted, accompanying the run, with laughter. Kanyun turned slowly, looking after him. A smile appeared on his face, tired, angry, calm. The dignity fell by the tree, breathing heavily. The heart was beating, rang in the temples, my hands trembled. He was sure when he left death. Notification of the system broke out in the air. The message appeared. The main core of the dungeon is extracted. Following, the portal of the dungeon is activated to the exit. He stared for the council and the inscription, not believing his eyes. He looked at the message, not understanding how possible. He knew what that means. The core is destroyed. Kanyun survived, managed. Sana was surprised how Kanyun cleaned the dungeon alone. He realized that he had nowhere to go, neither in the dungeon nor beyond. The main core of the dungeon is extracted. The portal is activated for exit. Previously, Kanyun rushed to the goblins, destroying everyone in his path. San knew that Kanyun was strong, but did not know what exactly he was capable of. Kanyun had great power and high resistance. For a fight with a crowd, not only power is needed, but also the ability to keep the defense. It was important to withstand the attacks and reach the boss in a straight line. This is a dangerous strategy where delay threatens a failure. The bathroom stood in front of the portal, realizing the power of Kanyun. He thought Kanyun was just fighting well. But now he understood someone unusual contacted him. Kanyun possessed unimaginable power. Gross power was his main weapon. The magical crystal of the goblin shaman and the ring of the croc is a strength of 50 out of 50. The ring increases magical power by 4 points and the mana recovery rate by 10%. Kanyun looked at the ring shining on his finger. He thought about the dignity and the opportunity to deal with him quickly. Kanyun went through the portal and saw many people at the exit. He asked why they came, surprised at their numbers. The crowd replied that she did not come to fight, but wanted to agree. A man in a suit came out of the crowd, the head of the guild Bait Yung Yung. He tried to shake his hand to clans, but he refused. Kanan urged the man to go to business, irritated by such courtesy. Yung Neong invited Kunhen to join their guild with benefits and support. The man saw in Kunhen the key to the strength and growth of his guild. Kanyun listened carefully, evaluating the proposal. He abandoned the offer, not wanting to join the guild. The man grinned, anticipating the refusal, and handed the business card again. Kanan took a business card, carefully looked and tore it into 2 parts. The head and crowd looked in surprise at his daring behavior. Kanyun laughed and said that he was not as a weakness as they thought. He mockingly asked if the head was furious and offered to fight. The man abandoned the fight, recalling that they came for negotiations. Kanyun objected that there would be no other time for discussion. He compared the situation with crawling cockroaches that climb everywhere. San thought that Kanyun, although crazy, was clearly cool and confident in himself. Sana looked inquiringly at the chapter, expecting further actions. Kanyun got into the car, thinking about the recent battle and the exhaustion of mana. In this state, he was a slight target. He forgot about the dignity. Anger grew due to the actions of the guildmaster. Sun volunteered to accompany Kanyun, helping to prepare for a dangerous meeting, one of the guys said. The guildmaster shouted, demanding to file a sword to punish Sun. Sona was on his knees, fearing and begging to spare his life. The guildmaster asked if Sun was ready to fulfill any of his condition. Does he want to live? Sona cried, agreeing to everything, but the guildmaster pierced him with a sword. The guildmaster called Sona as a traitor and kicked him with his foot, as such as he hoped, to stay alive. Sona fell into the portal, which immediately closed. The crowd watched what was happening in complete shock and tension. The guildmaster summoned the deputy to find out the identity and plans of Kanyun. The deputy confidently accepted the order, wiping the sword from blood. The deputy reported that the surveillance of Kanyun has already been organized. The car with the driver quietly followed Kanyun in the back. The guildmaster grinned, not believing in Kanan's refusal from his proposal. He said that the pressure would increase if the relatives of Kanyun suffer. The guildmaster promised to press Kanyun to understand the seriousness of the situation. He thought how long Kanyun could withstand such pressure. The sister asked what he would be for dinner after a long day. Kanyun said that first you need to pay for your mother's sick leave. The beef restaurant was filled with the smell of fried steaks on the stove. The sister was surprised that the unemployed graduate so often buys an expensive beef. Kanyun replied that spending money on food is the most important thing. Sister offered to help fry the meat, extending her hand. Kanyun asked about her mother and her condition after illness. The sister said that my mother is recovering and could wake up soon. He was glad. Sister noticed his rare smile. The sister accused him of constant frowning and the absence of a real smile. Kanyun insisted that he was smiling all the time, but his sister did not mean the smile of a psychopath. Suddenly, Kanyun grabbed his stomach and said that he urgently needed a toilet. The sister recalled that the meat was almost ready and asked for it quickly. Kanyun hurried to the men's toilet, thinking that these were the consequences of 2 days in the dungeon. There it was bad with the restroom. Leaving, he saw a man standing near his sister, who turned around and bowed to him. The sister asked if he knew the man. He introduced himself to his acquaintances and handed the note to Kanta-kun. Kanan was surprised, not understanding who the person is and why the note. A familiar person would not immediately leave, not saying hello to him. He thought that he had to greet him at least. Kanyun carefully read the note, not expecting such a message. The note included a greeting and a reminder of the invitation from the head of the guild. There was also indicated the phone number and wishes of all the best. Kanyun wondered what to do with this invitation and what the next step will be. In the evening, my sister invited Kanyun to go to the store for beer, but he refused. The sister decided to buy a beer for herself and drink alone. Kanyun chose to go on his own and buy beer. The seller said goodbye and thanked for the purchase. The streets around were deserted and lit by lanterns. Kanyun thought that it was possible to go to the dungeons less and spend more time at home. He heard a call. His father called. He said that his mother woke up and recovered. Father said that his friend came to visit his mother and handed over greetings. Kanyun was surprised and asked the name of his friend. His name is. This caused him fear and anger. The next day, Miena and her colleague met on the way to work. One of them overslept. The weekend only ended. 2 girls met Mrs. Shenson. She was in armor. They greeted her. The mistress gave them coffee and wished them a good day, and the girls discussed her oddities. They watched her withdrawn. Why is she always in armor? They were surprised. It is a little strange, but it seems a good person. All people are special, but Sona is really an angel, and Mian thought about the worst of them. Each person is special, each in his own way. Mian was what to tell. She saw a lot. Someone breaks their hands during sparring. Someone has a gangster muzzle since registration. He looked like a fierce orc. She still dreamed of nightmares, and suddenly Ken Hyun appeared behind her. Their views met. She was horrified, and he held out his hand. The girls screamed, "Police!" Zirenya called to the rescue and asked to save them. Kan Hyun asked about Kim Niena. He needed him to protect his family. The girls said that Kim Nien is now absent. He only sometimes works as an instructor here. Kim was at a meeting. He talked about increasing the level of dungeons and the importance of people with abilities. They knocked on the door. Kim said that the meeting was not over yet. The man announced a commotion in the reception because of his acquaintance. In the center of Seoul, a tall skyscraper towered. Kanhen sat in the reception of Kim. Kim said that they would see, but he did not expect the meeting to happen in this way. Kim asked Kanyun in what case he granted. Kanyun turned to Kim with a request to protect the family from Gilda Bay. Kim noted the fame of the guild, but said that it is impossible to intervene officially. Kan Hyun explained that he was going to destroy the guild himself in order to solve the problem. Kim asked why he was chosen to help in this matter. Kan Hyun replied that Kim is the strongest person he knows. He added that he does not trust his friend Yusun. He is a little crazy, and he does not even know his number. Kan Hyun asked to defend his family for only 1 week, promising to generously pay. Kim recalled that he is the deputy leader of the guild and is not interested in money, but more important things. Kan Hyun with irony asked if Kim wants his body, causing a laughter in that laughter. Kim said that if everything goes successfully, it will be necessary to meet with the leader of the guild for approval and possible assistance. 5 guards stand outside and inside the chamber of the parents of Kan Hyun. 5 more patrol at the work of his younger sister, using reasonable prepositions. Kan Hyun is glad of such a level of protection, but Kim warns him. About danger, he definitely wants to go alone. There is a lot of people in the Guild of Bait. Kan Hyun thinks and notes that their guild is larger in size. But Kim reminds that the strength of the guild is not the size of the building, but the fact that they control many dungeons. This means that the guild bait is strong despite the modest building. Kim also recalls that after receiving a note, Kan Hyung immediately contacted the guild, and most likely they gathered all his strength. A sudden attack may work. Kan Hyun recalls that he agreed to meet and made it clear that the family's safety for him is in the first place. Thanks to this, he won the time to hire Kim. Then Kan Hyun takes out his wallet and gives Kimu, asks to park the car at the house but does not reveal all the plans. He promises to return alive and healthy by tomorrow and leaves. Kim remains at a loss. Bait met Konyun with emphasized solemnity. There were many people in the hall. The atmosphere resembled a guest of an honored guest. Konyun smiled but was inwardly alerted. Such a magnificent meeting seemed to him ostentatious. According to the reaction of the head of the guild and his environment, it was clear they intend to show that now he is part of the family. However, in the mind of Konyun, a different meaning of this word played. Family turns into shackles. This thought only strengthened determination. He activated his strength, the lion's roar of rage. Magic rushed down, hitting the floor. The flash blinded everyone, causing panic. People shouted, tried to hide. The chapter realized Kanyun destroys the floor, despite the metal reinforcement under the coating. He used Wine's secret technique, giant power. One powerful blow split the reinforcement. Paul began to crumble. People fell along with the debris. They were littered with pieces of concrete and metal. Conan with satisfaction observed the effect of destruction. At this moment, another ability was activated, the cover of Marav Rear. His skin was strengthened, becoming firmly as armor, providing additional protection in the event of a counterattack. The head of the guild approached, offering Kan-hyun prudent cooperation. Kan-hyun heard about his partnership and grinned inwardly. The devil was already crossed. The leader apologized for the visit to the family, hinting at the benefit of joint force against Dangon. He dreamed of overthrowing Kanseon and get higher, expanding the influence outside Korea. Kan-hyun in response appreciated the words as dementia, comparing them with teenage delirium. The head boasted of 200 members of the guild, inside the building and thousands around the country. He saw in Kan-hyun the missing symbol that is capable of leading the army along. Kan-hyun spat the leader in the face, showing his contempt for his plans. There was a heavy silence in the hall, mixing humiliation with the fury of observing members. Kan-hyun, grinning, called the dreams of the head of the guild by the delirium of a puberty teenager, advising him to record his fantasies for the audience of YouTube. The head of the guild slowly wiped saliva from his face. His face was distorted from contempt. He breathed hoarsely that such an answer was expected. Anger sounded in his voice. He called Kan-hyun a low-grade garbage, unable to comprehend the greatness of his plans. Anger rose in him, inflating vanity. Kan-hyun burst out laughing, comparing the ambitions of the chapter with the dreams of medieval nobles. The survivors froze in bewilderment. The head of the guild blushed. Rage and humiliation appeared on his face with sharp folds. His voice broke into a cry, and he gave the order to destroy the daring enemy. Masters instantly concentrated the confusion spell on one goal. The waves of darkness flowed to Kan-hyun, distorting vision and hearing, causing breakdown of perception. Magic pressure was thickening, as if a viscous night fell on a lonely figure. Around Kan-hyun, the air trembled, as if preparing to break through the locked force. He activated the lion roar of rage, filling the muscles with pulsating energy. The force hit from the inside. The magic waves of the opponents began to go out. The veil of the darkness for a moment froze, then scattered, leaving a pure lumen. The attackers staggered back, feeling their own mana flowing into the void. The level of threat suddenly changed. The hunters felt themselves driven by prey. Kan-hyun releases power. Mental debuffs scatter a ring of strong mind. Kan-hyun activates the integration of Muravlir. Heightened armor covers the skin and extinguishes spells. The head of the guild growls, demanding an immediate attack. The fighters form a new wave of magical pressure. The figures of opponents jump from the destroyed floor, trying to get closer through chaos. Through the veil, only flashes of steel and crumb of concrete under the blows are visible. Kan-hyun meets the attackers with accurate dissection. Each wave makes the next one. The blades slide through the armor, leaving no wounds. The reflected force breaks the wrists. The head of the guild clenches his fists. Anger turns into a powerless growl over a broken front. The burning building of the guild turns into a black rectangle. Smoke hid the sky. Kanyan was breathing heavily among the littered bodies. Blood flowed through the red-hot concrete. The head of the guild towered in front of him. Surviving fighters crowded behind Kan Hyun. The leader mocked the wounded enemy, claiming that they are the same in essence. Kan Hyun rejected the comparison, believing that the killers should be ready to die. The head confidently announced the imminent death of Kan Hyun, seeing him exhausted. Dark tentacles, which constrained the body of the Kanjin, burst from the ground. In the reflection of the blade of the deputy, Kahan's face flashed, whose sword spilled new blood. Steel pierced the hero's back. The thoughts of long resistance fell silent in her head. The head praised the deputy for an exact blow, preparing to deliver the control. He touched the enemy's head with a spell. The flesh began to burn with a bright flame. The scream of pain cut smoke. The body of Kan Hyun covered the deadly fire. The head of the guild moved away, lit a cigarette, and watched the bonfire devour the enemy. The battle brought more than 30 corpses and 50 heavy wounded among the guild fighters. The losses were estimated as serious losses caused by a single person. The leader ordered to remove all the equipment from the fallen, hoping at least a little recruitment of the damage. But Kanhun's body disappeared. The night enveloped the city. The system reported the resurrection and fines for a day. He opened the door of the apartment, found his sister in the living room. Fatigue was read in her gaze. There were traces of armor and dirty soles on the carpet. The freshly washed floor had to be wiped again. Kanyan felt hunger after his death, thought only about food and hot broth. The sister grumbled, noticing that he was again in shoes and armor, but still put dinner. 2 days later, Keiki Gorge is a dungeon under the control of the Bait Guild. 2 sentinels were bored at the gate, complaining about rare visits of adventurers to their dangerous sector. Rumors about the cruel affairs of the guild scared the hunters. The risk of death and loss of equipment did not attract them. The silence was interrupted by steps. A lone figure in a mask and dark armor appeared on the trail. Metal plates reflected the light. The silhouette was approaching without hesitation. The sentinels looked at each other, feeling fear. The stranger radiated a threat. In memory, it arose as he destroyed the floor of their headquarters. Thought made the heart to squeeze. Kan Hyun realized the frontal attack against the guild reminded him of a throw of eggs into a granite wall. The endless resurrection gave an infinite number of eggs, but the fines cut out force for a day and slowed down progress. He decided to destroy the enemies pointily. He invaded their dungeons and cut out the parties one by one. In the Cake Gorge, the mask hid her face. The hand squeezed the throat of the last surviving fighter Bait. The rest lay lifeless. Blood was absorbed into the sand. The prisoner trembled, not understanding why asking for forgiveness. Ignorance did not save from Kara. Kan Hyun threw him to the ground, put his pen, and ordered to record all the dungeons that the guild holds. The man hastily displayed the names, trying not to tremble. The sheet began to be saturated later. Kan Hyun wondered why the police did not notice the murder. Cameras were absent in captured locations. Rumors about bribery went, but there is little evidence. The guild chose zones without observation. The sheet was filled with addresses. Kan Hyun took it, briefly praised, and touched the enemy's head. Magic light pulled from his palm. The captive's skin flashed. The scream of pain tore the silence of the gorge. Kan Hyun left, deciding not to leave traces and clean up to the end. The media reported the buildings of the popular guild were destroyed. It was no different from the actions of the monsters. The population was alarmed. All windows of the Bait headquarters were knocked out. The facade is covered with cracks. The building was blazing. Representatives of the guild explained that they should explore the monsters for the benefit of mankind. Inside the cabinet, the head of the guild fiercely hit the table, angry with failure excuses. But how else to hide the actions of that abnormal? The deputy burst, having received an ashtray in the forehead, and yet he delivered an alarming news. An unknown raider has already defeated the 7th dungeon of Bait. 100 fighters died. Each strengthening of security led only to an increase in losses. Panic grew. The chapter ordered to send all available people on duty, organize shifts without rest. The deputy left the office, wiping blood from his forehead. Silence reigned in the office. The chapter was left alone, recalling the events of the last 5 days and strange coincidences. Kankin's body disappeared immediately after the attack. There were no official explanations. 2 days later, point raids began on the Guild of the Guild. The damage grew rapidly. In the head of the leader, the belief of hidden accomplices in a large-scale conspiracy is strong. Despite his irritation, He understood that the situation was getting out of control and requires assistance. At that moment, he called on the phone, and at the other end of the line was a familiar ally, Hyon. The head of the guild spoke about his problem and expressed hope for support. The interlocutor doubted the material benefit, since he already had a lot of money, but agreed to help for the sake of participation in this battle. He noted that he was interested in the prospect of checking the new fighter, the Rowdy, which the head of the guild spoke of. At the end of the conversation, the ally expressed his readiness to join the case, smiling in anticipation of the upcoming events. The night came, and two guards stood at the gate. One of them, Yusin, tried to start a conversation, but the interlocutor remained silent and reluctantly answered. Yusin was looking forward to the arrival of an unusual guy who was supposed to sight, hoping that the expectation was not in vain. Suddenly he heard steps and was alert. A masked man was approaching them. The sixth sense of Yusin, his special ability, worked sharply, warning of danger. This was the first time when the signal was so loud that he understood. If he did not want to die, you need to run. However, the one who came was a friend, Kanhen. Yusin was amazed to see him and in surprise asked what he was doing here. Yusin smiled and asked Konhyun whether he was really involved in the destruction of a group of people. Their conversation pushed Konhyun to think. Perhaps behind the guild debate is a rich family, which was reminded of the words of Kim, the Yusin family. Konhyun brought the sword to the Yusin's throat, tried to find out if he was working for the guild. Yusin did not want him to equal him with this garbage. Konhyun in response mockingly doubted this, asking why Yusin was here. Yusan explained that the guild belongs to Niena. He expressed neglect of those whom Konhyun considers his enemies, describing the situation as a game where one Bandyugan humiliates, begging for help. Konhyun accepted this with humor and decided not to intervene, offering once to eat together. However, he did not even know his number, and suddenly he felt danger. Yusin was already striving for an attack, but Konhyun managed to stop the blow in time. Yusin considered everything too predictable and boring, laughing at the situation. Kanhyun was surprised at the sudden attack of Yusin from behind when he swung a mace. The sword and mace collided in a powerful blow, and Kanhyun thought that he could spare a friend. At that moment, Yusin encouraged him, urging him to give everything from himself and not restrain for a second. The power of the giant, the secret technique of wine, was in action when Kanhyun rushed into the attack. Yusin deftly evaded, smiling and noting that Kanhyun became an even more formidable opponent. He admired his friend's power, enjoying the battle, who, as he admitted, did not plan, but felt a long-forgotten excitement. Yusin saw this in the expression on the opponent's face and suggested that they enjoy the battle together. Suddenly, the deputy tried to intervene, but Sayun easily threw off his blow to the mace, causing surprise to Kanhyun. He realized that they were lying allies. Yusin regretted that he had to kill him, because he really wanted a worthy of fighting Kanhen. The whole mood was gone. Kanhyun expressed irritation to Yusan's behavior, but he explained that he did not want him to hate him. The conversation smoothly went to Niena, the illegitimate son of an influential chairman, whose arrogance was the cause of tension. Kanhyun was not going to allow to influence his actions and intimidate his enemies with the influence of his enemies. He turned around and was about to leave, urging not to waste time on empty conversations, advising Yusan to relax. However, Yusin detained his friend, declaring his desire to join and observe Chan's reaction, anticipating future conflicts. He would see him to see how he will rage. The head of the guild shouted, holding his head. 3 more dungeons were plundered, but Yusin did not answer. He was indignant at the futility of his subordinates, breaking everything around. It seemed that he did not understand why he was paying these idiots. Did he ask a lot, just to kill one guy in order to end the enemies? He ordered to collect all the members of the guild, no matter how much time it would take. Diseases, death, relatives, everything should go into the background, and everyone was obliged to be in place. His anger was indomitable. The situation was getting worse. More and more people left the guild. The connection with them was lost. The deputy proposed not to threaten relatives so as not to provoke an even greater outflow, but the chapter was adamant. It was necessary to force everyone to obey. In the midst of a crisis, an unknown subscriber called a mobile. The voice turned out to be familiar. The conversation clarified a lot. Guild bait is now under a powerful press. Everything can be easier than he thought. Judging by the rumors, someone seriously prevented the bait guilds from working, and the situation looked suspicious. Yuson and Kanhen carefully read comments. Despite the fact that Kanhen was doing this for only a week, he decided that the time had come to put all this to the end. It is a pity that fun is coming to an end, they thought. When Yuson asked about the future finale, Kanhen whispered something in his ear. The Yuson's reaction was instant. He called Kanhen abnormal. The head of the guild read a message about the meeting scheduled for tomorrow at 6 in the evening in the dungeon of the Disrungen Forest on Mount Sosan with a noble robber. He anticipated how he would remove this impudent face with skulls and hang it in his office. People around were whispering about the need to be careful, but not to come was too risky. The head with difficulty accepted the idea that he would have to take such worthless people with him, all because of one guy. He recalled a telephone conversation. They used to offer help, but soon refused, leaving the chapter in confusion. The man said he washed his hands and advises to rely on his own father, throwing the phone. The head of the guild realized that this person was even worse than Yusun. Even it was difficult to call him a man. He burned a letter covered by anger and bitterness, anticipating an imminent reprisal against arrogant enemies. Meanwhile, a meeting was held in another place. Where the topic of the day was discussed, the guild bait gathered its members, including Hyon. The conversations were about the fact that the help from the allies should not be expected, and if the guild perishes, Mr. Choi would not intervene. But if Hyon Sansa dies, the guy objected. Choi demonstrated force, causing magic tentacles who grabbed the man by the throat, lifting into the air. He was not going to see about anyone. After that, the man was released, and he fell on the sofa, trying to catch his breath. He was ordered to do his work and attract new facilities for financing. An order he perceived without objections. Dunji Dungeon. The Retrupanov forest was anxious. A group of people came out of the gate. All of them were members of the guild bait. The leader in exasperation specified time, and having heard that the arrows showing 6 hours, 3 minutes, he could not restrain his annoyance. He was angry. The one who scheduled the meeting was late. Perhaps in vain they came. Suspicion was in the air, and he ordered everyone to be alert. No one knew whether their ambushes were waiting or everything that was happening was only an empty threat. Suddenly, the deputy gave an alarm. A moving point appeared in the distance, behind which a trail of dust stretched. Everyone turned there, and soon the figure became distinguishable. It was Kan Hyun. He fled, and a flock of the Distrupans was moving behind him. The head of the guild did not immediately believe his eyes. The thought of a possible double flashed through my head, but too much in this appearance was real. He understood. In front of them exactly the one whom they had long considered dead. Thoughts swept in the head with a whirlwind. Kan Hyun is really alive, and judging by the expression, he knew why he had come. Kan Hyun raised his hand, demonstrating the cub Denrupan as a strange gift. The crowd of the guild was surprised. In the hands of the enemy was a fluffy baby. Kan Hyun sharply threw the cub into the center of the system, turning the Mercy into a flying shell. One of the fighters rushed forward, discarding the spear to catch the animal. The kid fell right into his arms, causing a surge in tenderness and relief. Another part of the detachment was outraged by the cruelty of the enemy, reproaching him in inhumanity. The head of the guild interrupted them, recalling a real threat. Behind Kankan, the whole flock of angry Drapans, inflated by abduction, moved. Their roar mixed with a clang of weapons and a panic noise. The earth trembled with hundreds of paws. The forest reflected an echo of an evil choral roar. The fighters realized the cutie became a bait, turning the field into a lethal trap. The enemy used a live throw as a tactical move, tearing the construction. The defense turned into a random indent. Kan Hyun shouted a new mockery and threw a bag full of children of the Destrupinov into the crowd. The bag opened in the air, and the Destrupins scattered over the fighters, like live rain from cuties. While the crowd was rushing about, Kan Hyun lifted his sword and rushed into attack on the head of the guild. The blade flashed, but the enemy managed to retreat. In the next instant, the Destrupins have already digged into the fighters, preventing them from moving and defending themselves. They came for their cubs, and they will not spare anyone. Using chaos, Kan Hyun turned and disappeared into the forest with a slight grin, wishing the enemies of good luck. The head of the guild screamed furiously, looking after him. The idea of how difficult it is to cope with the D-troops because of their ability to become invisible, due to their ability to torment him. And now the combat system is also destroyed. All the tactics went to dust. Magic barriers burst under the onslaught of animals. The soldiers scattered, confused. The head of the guild, covered by rage, ordered to retreat. Panic instantly covered the ranks. Someone from the crowd with relief noted that he was in the rear, where the chances of surviving above. The crowd, distraught with fear, rushed to the portal, pushing each other in an effort to get out alive. A man came out of the portal. His appearance made everyone stop in a daze. It was Yusin. He slowly straightened up, holding a mace behind him. Immediately for a second, he brought a weapon and crunched it with a crunch on the first in a row. Those who were closer. Blood sprinkled to the sides, screams of pain tore the air. The bodies of people scattered around, turning the exit from the dungeon into a real nightmare. The path to salvation instantly turned into a trap. Soyun, covered by excitement, waved a ballade with fury, crushing everything around. His eyes burned with madness and enthusiasm. He enjoyed every moment of the massacre. A panic reigned in the crowd. From behind the back there were screams for help, screams of horror and prayers for mercy. The head of the guild stood nearby, bewildered and tense. He tried to realize what was happening, while the chaos around was only growing. Thoughts rushed. Yusin betrayed them. But when exactly this happened? How he managed to spend them all? It was a complete failure. He felt everything collapsed. A desperate hope flashed in my head. Maybe there was still some way to escape. Turn everything back. At least one. The slightest chance to survive. The head of the guild looked at Kan Hyun, who fought with his fighters. Anger overwhelmed him. Everything went too far. Thoughts were confused. He is tired. They became more and more, and it seemed that they did not end. He clenched his fist and he caught fire with a flame. Kan Hyun at this time inflicted a mortal blow to the enemy. Suddenly, Kan Hyun heard a cry behind him. The head of the guild fled to him. His body was covered with fire. He was not going to retreat. If this is the end, he was going to take Kan Hyun with him. He activated the skill of self-immolation. Kan Hyun closed his hand from the heat that gripped everything around. The flame raged, screams were heard. People did not understand why they were. The head of the guild realized how destructive his skill was dangerous even for himself. But if at the same time he can drag Kan Hyun with him, the victim will be justified. He held out his hand and touched the enemy's face. Kan Hyun calmly reacted. According to him, such an attack could only warm him. He used his magic. The stream of force through the head of the guild, and he, bleeding, flew on the ground, stopping at the body of a dead wolf. He settled without strength. Kan Hyun ordered him to sit and watch. After all that happened, there could be no peace. Now his fate is to observe the death of his own people. The head of the guild sat on an empty battlefield. Everything around was dead. Consciousness swept madness, and his laughter spread through the fading meadow. All the fighters lay without signs of life, and he continued to laugh, as if enchanted. Kan Hyun and Soyun approached him, watching this strange picture. In the eyes of the defeated leader, despair and a barely noticeable prayer for salvation flashed. Thoughts rushed about his tragic past, an illegitimate son, despised by a family. It was recalled how relatives pulled him into the struggle for power, only for his own convenience. The support of his father was formal and gave only an occasion for new bites of envious people. He felt that for relatives it was always only an instrument in their intrigues. The change in the world and the appearance of training gave hope, but could not lead to victory. The awakened changed the order of the world, returning the law of survival of the strongest. The leader of the guild saw in this the opportunity to turn fate, but did not manage to develop a thought. The blow of the sword cut off his confession. His head rolled along the blood-covered earth. Kan Hyun and Soyun were silently observed. The flame of the battle was gasped in the silence of the dead field. For Kan Hyun, the elimination of the enemy seemed simple garbage harvesting, suitable only for a landfill. The feeling after revenge turned out to be empty, as if stuck sulfur stuck from his ear. Relief without emotions. Soyun grinned when he heard the next unsuccessful metaphor of Kan Hyun. Kan Hyun thoughtfully examined the battlefield, littered with bodies. He sorted out in his head what to do with trophies. Soyun refused to pray. He had enough money. Then Kan Hyun decided that all the remaining would go for sale. Early, the money did not really bother him. The income from the dungeons was more than enough. But now he clearly understood. One's strength and personal resources are not enough. To protect what is really important, you will need both money and influence. Kan Hyun and Soyun stood at the gates, observing how the last spark of magic disappears. Junzan looked at the landscape in front of them and said that now everything was really over. Kan Hyun nodded silently. His gaze was concentrated and serious, as if thoughts had already stepped far forward. He spoke about the possibility of creating his guild. Yusin immediately agreed, without even waiting for the end of the phrase. He felt that there was something interesting ahead. Kan Hyun tried to laugh it off, as if he did not plan to call him to the team at all, but he only laughed. Everything was already clear. At that moment, both of them could not know that the small guild created in a joke would eventually become the greatest force in Korea, not the kindest sense. They decided to go to eat beef. Kanyun hoped that he was not paying. Yusin grinned, recalling how much money has. A huge skyscraper towered above the city. It was the corporation building Sharing Man's, the office where the meeting was held. The responsibility for the advance of Neon lay on the shoulders of Choi Min-jun. Before him stood the chairman of the Kon Sok Group, Jung San-soo. He spoke with anger, accusing Min-jun of violation of the agreement. But he turned around. He was calm. His face expressed no anxiety or embarrassment. Min-jun reacted with cold neglect. He doubted the very fact of violations, feignedly surprised. San-soo violently retorted, recalling that a week has already passed since the disappearance of his son and members of his guild. But the interlocutor only shrugged. His answer was frankly cynical. He called his son San-soo with a garbage who had no abilities, and his very appointment, a whim no more. Young San-soo was furious. His voice broke with anger. He gave the order to destroy Min-jun. A second later, all the guard rushed forward. Min-jun remained sitting on the couch, absolutely calm. Shva opened his eyes and activated his strength. Huge red tentacles appeared from his body, who instantly grabbed all the attackers by the throat. They began to scream from unbearable pain, panting, unable to breathe. The tentacles lifted them into the air, not letting them come to their senses. Shiva Yu came up to the chairman of Chan closely and with icy calm recalled the concluded contract, having stated that he had fulfilled it as far as possible and asked what the claims were. Jung tried to object, but his words were quickly interrupted by a strict warning. If this is repeated, a serious answer would follow. After that, Shiva smiled sweetly, the tentacles disappeared, and the attackers collapsed to the ground exhausted. He expressed satisfaction that the issue was settled and reminded of the need to pay the promised money until the end of the day. At the same time, he was interested in who exactly dealt with Neon. The Guild Bait Palais and the sudden disappearance of such a large organization caused a storm of rumors and speculation. The media and adventurers excited the public, discussing whether it was true that Bait was destroyed. There were hot discussions, people disappeared in the dungeons, and all this was associated with the struggle for power and the appearance of a maniac. The growth of threats in dungeons and the probability of the appearance of criminal organizations became more and more real. However, with the advent of new guilds, the Guild Bait began to disappear from the news and was finally lost, as if no one had noticed its disappearance. The problem seemed resolved. All the annoying flies were eliminated. At this time, Yusan and Kanhen sat at the table, lunch. Yusan rejoiced at his success in battle, and the fact that thanks to Kanhan's ties, all the extracted ludus managed to sell favorably. The mood seemed excellent, but a clear spleen was read across the face of one of them. Kanyun explained that the problem in the title that he received was a cruel destroyer of the tank. His description said that it was prejudice, as if monsters had no feelings. This title is a gift for countless destroyed families in a cruel way. This exclusive title gives strength +2 and causes others to instinctive fear, the hostility of the gaps. He repeated these lines, realizing that unequipped titles give only half of their effects. Conan was already at the limit due to how people reacted to him, and with this title of misunderstanding, he would only add, Sion reassured that Hyun did not worry about such trifles and considers Konhen a terrible brow, so no one would notice the difference. At that moment, the phone rang from Koken. The name Neon from Dungun appeared on the screen. The message was from Kim Neon, who reminded of the agreement to meet with the leader of their guild. And he suggested organizing a meeting as soon as possible, asking when the Kongan will be free. The Dangun Guild was on the 12th floor. She did not seem terrible to Ken Hyun. He thought that this person could be taken with him and asked Kim, pointing to Soyun. Kim said that the leader of the guild gave his permission. Soyun added that the leader contacted him only 4 times and that he and Kan Sayanun were familiar. Ken Hyun reacted that the word Nuna from his mouth sounds terribly and asked when they managed to meet. Kim explained that they had once seen at a cultural event. Kanyan was surprised who Kan Sayanun was and noticed that she seemed to be also one of those who had trained, and he, despite his training, remained overboard. They approached the reception room. Kim knocked on the door and called the leader. There was a voice with an invitation to enter. They opened the door and entered. Inside was Kan Se-yeon, the leader of the guild Dangun. Kan Hyun shook her hand, introduced herself, and she expressed the joy of acquaintance and said that she had heard about him a lot of good from Kim. Soon greeted her, and Kim, wishing them good luck, left, closing the door. Kan Se-yeon invited to sit on the sofa, after which Kan Hyun thanked her for his help and expressed a desire to repay. She said that it was not difficult and should not think about it. Kan Hyun admitted that he does not like to be in debt and asked to go to business. She agreed and, looking directly into her eyes, invited Kan Hyun to join the Dangun Guild. After his refusal, an awkward pause hung in the room. The head noted that she would not insist and accepted his answer. Kan Hyun expressed his readiness to help in another way and promised to support if necessary. The head replied that for them this is also a profitable deal, to have a strong, awakened in debtors. She asked how much the current lull in the world, full dungeons and prosperous crime, would last. Kan Hyun admitted that he certainly does not know, but he believes that it is better to become stronger because there is little time. Only 3 years before the connection with the measurement, which threatens in danger. When asked why she thinks so, the head replied that she could not disclose all the details. The head of the guild mentioned that there is an essence that is known to absolutely everything, and that they have an awakened one, capable of making contact with it. Kan Hyun guessed that it was most likely about the measurement administrator. The chapter hinted that Kan Hyun already understood what was happening. The complexity of the dungeons is growing rapidly, while the power of the awakened lagged behind. Kan Hyun, confident in his abilities, noted that this does not concern him. Sayun added ironically that, as they say, that which does not kill does more. But at the same time, he joked that the monsters did not kill the firearms. Therefore, among the awakened, and there are no those who use it. Crossbows and bows, however, remain in demand. And this confirms that for survival, you need to be able to adapt to new conditions. The chapter emphasized only those who act, despite the changes, can become truly strong. She said bluntly that Konhana could become a hero. He dismissed. He does not consider himself kind, especially considering what happened to the Bait Guild. But the chapter answered sharply, they were garbage. This surprised Kan Hyun. She explained, Bait would still not play any role in the salvation of mankind, which means they did not deserve protection. The head looked at him without hesitation and firmly said, a person like him is more useful than hundreds of those whom he destroyed. The world is not protected by saints. The stronger saves it. Not those who talk about morality, but those who are able to act when the time comes. Her words did not sound highly. They felt convinced. She saw in Kan Hyun not just a fighter, but a weapon capable of turning the course of future events. And in this dangerous, unstable world, where the truth is less, power became the only real argument. Kim went into the office after he spent guests. The head asked if he spent them, and he confirmed, adding that he organized a landing in the car. When he asked her opinion about the meeting, she replied that the impression was extremely positive. Although she admitted that everything went differently than she expected. She explained, at the moment when she started talking about the measurement administrator, she noticed how Karang's eyes trembled for a split second. It was enough to understand he went through training. Meanwhile, in the central part of the protected zone, there were a gate. They were carefully guarded. 2 dungeons, E and D rank, were distinguished by only 1 letter in the name, but the difference between them was colossal. Not only the strength and number of monsters increased significantly, but their diversity was striking, especially in the dungeon of D rank, in which she was near the laboratory of Deans. It was there that an almost abnormal variety of forms, types, and behavioral models of creatures was observed. Kan Hyun walked along the blood-stained floor of the dungeon, not being distracted by the bodies of the orcs scattered everywhere. The battle with them did not require effort. Whether it was an ordinary orc, warrior, or leader, the strategy almost did not change. However, recently the dungeons have changed. Instead of the same type of enemies, creatures with different forms, styles of battle and weaknesses began to appear, which forced to adapt each time again. On the way, he met the Ogra Himir, an unnatural creature with the body of the orc and the head of the goblin. His appearance resembled an unsuccessful result of the experiment, as if someone had gathered a monster in a haste without thinking about the balance. Kan Hyun internally noted that the monster was more like a weakening change, as if in the game after an unsuccessful update. powerful in appearance, but with obvious spaces. However, the danger was obvious. The monster brought a huge hammer and brought it to the ground, but Kan Hyun managed to jump away, avoiding a blow. Confident, he continued the maneuvers, evaluating the strength of the enemy. The monster released a viscous liquid in his direction. A few drops hit the floor, which began to melt under the influence of acid. Kan Hyun reacted quickly, involving magical protection. He understood. This enemy is not only physically strong, but also has dangerous properties. His armor clearly belonged to the elite category. Nevertheless, observing the course of the battle, Kan Hyun identified weakness: weapons. The massive hammer that the monster used became its goal. He concluded the victory lies not in the frontal attack, but in the deprivation of the enemy of his strength. And in this battle, he was going to do just that. At the same time, one of the men frowned, hearing a piercing, wild cry, which was heard somewhere in the depths of the dungeon. He turned around and asked who could scream like that, but his partner only dismissed. They say, "This is someone hunting, nothing unusual." Instead of worrying about other people's screams, he advised to focus on what was happening right in front of them. A silent girl stood in front of them. Her gaze was cold and the presence was ominous calm. One of the men grinned, noticing how he began to like this place. The dungeons always brought chaos, but they had their own romance, and yet strange sounds were getting closer. He noticed this, but again received in response only an irritated mutter. Nothing to worry, just another hunt. Both turned out at the same time. Behind their backs from the darkness, Kan Hyun was slowly approaching, dragging a huge hammer stained in blood and mucus. He was approaching, and then, with a slight mockery, as if with sincere pleasure, he added, "He just likes to need people." Two men were first alerted, and then, looking at each other, snorted. One of them, with irony in his voice, quit what a moron in front of them. The second, squinting, specified that he had a hammer behind him. And before someone managed to react, Kan Hyun lifted the weapon above his head. The metal case of the hammer with a roar hit the ceiling of the dungeon, causing a surge of indignation in this. One of the men yelled that he had survived from the mine, once he decided to wave such a colossus in such a cramped space. But contrary to expectations, the hammer did not get stuck and did not fall. Kan Hyun with unexpected ease lowered him down and hit the floor in front of them. The stone cracked, sparks flew around, and for a moment everyone was silent. He calmly shook his hands. Konhena said that the hammer is too cumbersome and inconvenient for use as the main weapon. And as if it was about trifles, I put it in the inventory. His opponents froze in a dumb surprise until one of them laughed. A spectacular beginning, but it seems that he even realized that all this was complete nonsense. Meanwhile, Kun Hyun was approaching, not showing either fear or anger. One of the men grinned, grabbed the knife and rushed to the attack, confident that without a weapon it was not dangerous. However, it all ended in one movement. Kun Hyun simply slapped him a slap in the face. He collapsed to the ground, as if he had received a blow with a sledgehammer. The rest looked at each other dumbfounded. Kun Hyun leaned over, grabbed the defeated by the hair, and looking at the others, demanded to give everything they have. The reaction was only scraps of phrases, "It is abnormal," and a scream, "Everyone is on the attack. He is alone." "How to call you?" Kun Hyun suddenly asked, turning to the prick. "Come, Yusik," he muttered. "Okay, Yusik, I will avenge you," he answered with irony, and with a cry of attack by Gushik, threw him right in the nearest enemy. Yusik, now becoming a shell, crashed deliciously into one of the attackers, knocking him down. The blow turned out to be so effective that even those who stood further froze. Kan Hyun grinned, nodded with approval, and added loudly, "It turned out well. Well, let's. Tehran, Yusik will be sipped." The survivors shouted, retreating in a panic. "Start, psycho!" Someone stumbled. The other threw the weapon. Everything happened too quickly. Kan Hyun slowly was approaching. His steps were measured, his gaze was icy. One of the attackers, wriggling on the floor, cried out with disgust, "Phew, damn, his lips touched me." And the other was already squealing, "Save! Help!" They lost their self-control, forgetting about the pride and power of numbers. Panic crushed them. Aside, almost without moving, the girl stood. She obviously did not participate in the massacre. Her face was pale, her lips were clenched into a thin line. She was left alone. Neither weapons are in their hands nor the desire to intervene. She silently looked at what was happening. Kan Hyun glanced in her direction, wiped his palm on his pants, and as if just completing the routine task. Kan-hyun appreciated that all this took more time than he expected. The girl who was silent before came closer and thanked him for his help, noting that thanks to him she escaped troubles. Kan-hyun calmly dismissed, explaining that the murder of people is his hobby and that he did not need to bow. She introduced herself as Shin-sona and with a slight smile asked how to contact him better. He replied embarrassed that he was just Kan-hyun. The girl seriously asked what to do to become as strong as he is. Her gaze became thoughtful. It was a historical moment. The third joined the two worst discharge of Korea, but this became known later. He repeated her question, doubting that it was difficult, and said that for this you just need to try. However, he noted that not all efforts lead to the result. Kun-hyun said that sometimes you need to try to death. Literally. It sounded strange given his ability to resurrect. He advised her to protect herself and decide whether to leave enemies alive. Leaving, he suddenly stopped, looked around the corner and asked if she could get out. She replied that it was unlikely. Conan was surprised. Usually in such cases, they ask for help. The girl admitted that she was not ready to help yet, but offered to accompany him during the raid, having promised to quietly collect magic stones and not interfere. He expressed doubts because of the danger, but she assured that she could take care of herself. After a small pause, Kanyan agreed, deciding that let him go with him. Kanyan walked ahead among the corpses of monsters, and the girl walked behind, collecting magic crystals. She showed secrecy skills and acted in battle as support, shooting at enemies, without interfering with the rear, taking on all the work to collect magic stones which greatly facilitated the battle. When Kanyan asked what she would do next, the girl replied that she was going to go through the dungeon to the very end, despite the enhanced energy of the boss in front. Suddenly the message appeared, the main core of the dungeon deleted, the portal is open to the exit from the dungeon. Kanon was surprised to climb forward, but then thought he felt the energy of the boss. It was a breakthrough of the dungeon. Meanwhile, the news reported a breakthrough into the Durang dungeon. At the same time, several dozen dungeons opened within Seoul. What caused the third large-scale influx of monsters? Called the invasion of monsters. Experts suggested that this is an organized terrorist act, significantly different from previous incidents, which already forced the government to attract the army. At the headquarters of the leader of the Alliance of Users of Coven Abilities, Donva reported that preparation for actions was completed, and the breakthrough occurred precisely in the Durang dungeon, located in the laboratory of Daeons in Kyogyud. This dungeon was considered too complicated to take it for cleaning before, and now it turned out that there was a large-scale crisis. There were no large guilds nearby, and the main forces of the guild Hangul were occupied in another place. The head gave the order to prepare 50 elite fighters for sending to Savan. Divide the rest into commands and direct to the rest of the dungeons. Kim reported on the current situation. Intelligence reported that the leader of the User Alliance of Abilities personally is being cleaned with his elite fighters. The head asked if they managed to cope. After all, there was not a single large guild nearby capable of organizing defense, except for the Han Gyeol Guild and several small groups. However, a report was received that one person with a huge sword and an impressive musculature straightened with monsters with lightning speed. The chapter was surprised, and Kim noted that his face is so evil that you can take for a monster. The head was at a loss for a moment, but then smiled, coming to the conclusion that there was no reason for concern. Kan-hyun stood in the middle of an area dotted with corpses of orcs and other monsters. The voices of people came around, expressing surprise and distrust. One person, a simple user of ability, coped with such a horde. One of the men apologized to Kan-hyun and thanked for the salvation, offering to repay for his help. Kan-hyun answered something sharply, demanding that he leave, warning that if he remains, he could die. The man was surprised, but Kan-hyun continued. The break did not close, which means that the boss will appear soon. Kan-hyun warned loudly that the boss would appear soon, and if they remained, they would die. People were silent, but one guy tried to object, saying that they were all users of abilities and could help. Kan-hyun went up to him and asked how many bosses he killed. The answer was uncertain, only one. Kan-hyun said that they would only interfere and insisted that everyone would go to the shelter. The crowd was confused and outraged by his words, but in the end, she agreed to leave. Kan-hyun was left alone, but the girl was left with him. He asked her to cover him with arrows and find the shelter, to which she agreed. A leg in the armor appeared from the portal. Several monsters came behind it. Kan-hyun was surprised. The three heavenly kings were in front of him, each of whom was no weaker than Urka, with whom he recently fought. Above them in the air, the skeleton in the mantle soared, the boss. The monster was surprised at the unusual buildings around, and then drew attention to Kan Hyun. And he expressed his bewilderment that he decided to shift his path alone. Kan Hyun was not at a loss. He took out the hammer and was ready for battle, calling the monster to a personal duel to drive the rest. The skeleton refused to fight one-on-one, which caused contempt at Kan Hyun, who rushed to the attack. The monsters were amazed at a powerful lion roar and the fury of Kan Hyun. He pushed away from the ground and, hanging in the air, began to strike in turn. The skeleton, watching the battle, noted that he does not feel magical energy from Kan Hyun, only pure physical strength. And I thought that it was a pity to kill such a strong enemy. It is better to grab alive and make it with your slave. Kan Hyun knocked the night orc from his feet with a powerful blow of the hammer. A helmet flew off his head, and he collapsed to the ground. Kan Hyun himself confidently landed on his feet, noting the severity of his weapons. At that moment, the skeleton directed his hand over him, covered by a magical radiance. The power of control of the mind was activated, and Kan Hyun's gaze changed. He froze, falling under the influence of the spell. The orc knight, now fully controlled by the skeleton, announced his victory and called on Kan Hyun to bow his head as a sign of devotion. But instead of submission, Kan Hyun himself began to glow with magic energy, radiating a red radiance which surprised the skeleton, who was watching him. Kan Hyun, with contempt, rejected the attempt to control consciousness, thanks to the Ring of Strong Mind, which effectively resisted the magic of the skeleton. The skeleton, irritated and surprised, realized that the enemy was protected by a special object, but he could not break the will of Kan Hyun. Suddenly, from a half-grade, an attack collapsed and he hit Kan Hyun, throwing him to the building. At the most critical moment, an arrow appeared in the air, aptly struck the tiger org, which led to his evil growl. Kan Hyun noted the accuracy and timeliness of the blow, mentally thanking the dream for support. The skeleton irritatedly watched what was happening, realizing that Kan Hyun had an ally. Despite the blow, Kan Hyun stayed on his feet and immediately moved to the counterattack using his hammer. He knocked Tiger Orca with an accurate blow to the head, and he crashed off to the ground. A sting suddenly arose in the air, and Kan Hyun pierced through, shed blood from the wound. He lowered the hammer to the ground, grabbed the lizard by the tail, lifted it into the air, and hit the ground with force. Quickly grabbing the sword from the inventory, Kan Hyun struck a strong blow. Blood sprayed from the wound in all directions. The skeleton carefully watched him, his eyes glowed red, and Kan Hyun himself was shrouded in the magic of red radiation. He understood that now there was one enemy, a skeleton with a bald head. Kan Hyun realized that magical reserves were almost exhausted. Regeneration was barely warming. A jump to attack the skeleton, soaring in the air, was no longer enough. In addition, the sting of the lizard let in the poison, and the limbs were poured with lead heaviness. The heart was beating in an unequal rhythm, but consciousness remained tenacious. He concentrated the rest of mana, directing it to the neutralization of poisoning. The red radiance washed the wound, muffling the effect of toxin. Then from the inventory, a long sword of the Bilgan appeared, the once ordinary blade weapon, which was soaked in the blood of many enemies and gaining an ominous aura. The effect of the berserker broke out on the blade. The muscles were filled with inhuman power, and consciousness began to slide to the verge of madness. The deafening explosion of force was carried through the body. Kan Hyun felt the poison finally loses its strength, and an excess of adrenaline pushes forward. Kan Hyun stood in front of the skeleton, exhausted and wounded, but did not retreat. Inside him, there was still a determination to continue the battle, despite the exhaustion. He had already prepared for the final jerk when a voice was heard behind him. Behind there was a man, the leader of the Alliance of Users of Abilities, Choi Donva, one of the few who completed full training. He appeared suddenly, confident, as if from another world. Having evaluated the situation and destruction, Donva recognized the efforts of Kan Hyun and took command of himself. Kan Hyun, with difficulty realizing who in front of him, tried to object, but the body no longer listened. The forces left him, and he fell to his knees and then fell on the concrete. He admitted to himself that it was still hard alone. At the last moment, before losing consciousness, the thought flashed through his head about how Donva spectacularly appeared, like the main character in the final scene. Kan Hyun came to his senses in a hospital bed. Nearby was his sister. She was the first to notice that he woke up. He, as always, began the conversation with reproaches. He reacted in his spirit, noting that her face is the first thing he sees after awakening, and it does not please. She, without losing sarcasm, reminded that his life is a waste of money and that it would be easier to die. They exchanged cobbles, but in this familiar exchange, concern was hidden. Kan Yun asked what happened to the dungeon, where a breakthrough of the monsters occurred. The sister replied that she did not know details but assured, now everything is under control. She told how surprised when she was called from the hospital and how she was struck when she saw in the corridor of the very leader of the Alliance of Abilities. Kun Yun recalled the business card Song Hyun Ho, which he received earlier. The idea that now there may be something owed to someone, he was not pleased. He quickly drove off these thoughts. The sister suddenly became more serious. She warned him to be careful. Although he has a unique ability, this does not mean that he is immortal. Suddenly, one day he will really die. Forever. Kan Yun grinned, but bitterness vowed in his voice. He noted that he does not die at all for pleasure. After each death, not only pain remains, but also a fall in the level. The pleasure is dubious. Kan Hyun noticed how much his sister's expression changed. Instead of the usual knuckle and irritation, fatigue and anxiety appeared in her gaze. He felt awkwardly, as if for the first time realized how his actions were reflected in those who were nearby. The words that he usually threw thoughtlessly now responded with emptiness. He became ashamed, and he quietly promised himself to be careful. Meanwhile, in the main office of the Alliance of Users of Abilities, they discussed the reasons for the recent decisions of the leader. No one could understand why he personally accompanied Kan Yun to the hospital and paid for treatment. He admitted that he was a witness to the appearance of a new player who was able to change the balance of power. He did not want to miss the chance to be next to those who, perhaps, will once overshadow himself. As for the escaped Lich, he disappeared from the battlefield as soon as he realized that the situation was getting out of control. In the hospital, the doctor said that there were no deviations. Kan Hyun was restored at incredible speed. Kan Yun told his sister that he had already been discharged. Everything is in order. The sister was surprised, not believing that his brother survived again, and asked about the payment for treatment. Kan Yun replied that the fine for resurrection is more expensive than just a bed in the hospital. At this time, an unfamiliar man, dressed with a needle, with an important face appeared at the reception. He asked to check the presence of a patient named Kankan. There was no such patient on the database. He could already be discharged. The man was upset, realized that he was late, and sighed heavily. At that moment, a voice rang behind him. Kan Hyun stood, looking at him in bewilderment. He came closer, confirming that he was inquired about the purpose of the stranger's visit. The man introduced himself as the leader of the unit of users of abilities at the security department. He handed the business card with the coat of arms and the name, Shin Tagil. Kan Yun took the business card, glanced briefly, then asked why the government needed him. Shin replied that they have a special interest in his abilities, which they cannot be ignored. The meat was fried on the stove. The aroma spread around the room. Kan Hyun evaluated the situation. Kanan noticed that the place is not cheap, but everything is in order. The interlocutor nodded with a smile. Kan Hyun grinned, thinking about his taxes, which now seemed to return to him in the form of dinner. Kun Hyun asked directly if he was going to offer him to join the organization. The man confirmed, but added that no one would force. This is just a proposal. Kan Hyun thought for whether he will become a civil servant. In principle, it didn't sound so bad. The man explained that this is more than just a position, participation and preparation for the new world. The organization appeared as a response to changes and an increase in the number of awakened users. The state realized that they could not be kept by force. The conflict would only aggravate the situation. Instead of suppression, an attempt to create a mutually beneficial system of cooperation. He clarified that he would personally give him part in this, to which the man began to explain the benefits. First of all, money, serious payments, and financial support for comfortable work. In the case of injuries or death, assistance to family, insurance, support at all levels. Kanhen noted that the conditions are not bad, but it will have to work a lot for such an offer. The man confirmed that there was a lot of work, but no one demands impossible. Freedom of action is guaranteed. The man said that there are already successful partners, the leader of the alliance Choi Donva and Kan Seon. Kan Hyen realized that cooperation would open two directions at once for development and influence. In the end, I decided to try, ready to accept the call and enter a new life. Kan Han dreamed of getting to the laboratory of Dion's by car, but understood that everything could be dangerous here. Suddenly he heard a familiar voice and saw a girl named Shison. The girl handed him a bag with crystals and apologized for the delay in the transmission. Kanhan was surprised that she was waiting for him, not even knowing if he would return. Shison explained that she promised to help and could not leave him. Kanhan thanked her and asked where his car was to continue his way faster. The girl bowed and asked to take her as a student, which caused surprise at Kanhan. He did not expect such an offer and asked her what she had in mind. The full moon illuminated the river. The clouds quickly sailed through the night sky. In the forest stood the gates of the dungeon F, the rank next to the village of Kurka. Somewhere in the distance there was a frightening roar, forcing the forest to tremble. The skeleton thought that he had never expected to be cornered by people. He had to hide in this abandoned and gloomy place. Suddenly, a man appeared in front of him. The boss of the dungeon D rank, he turned to him. The man asked the skeleton about Lishi Dionse. The skeleton was surprised. He explained that he freed the skeleton and is not an enemy. He held out his hand, asking if the skeleton would take a proposal to help. The skeleton was silent, weighing whether it was worth trusting a stranger. Morning came, and the girl introduced herself as Shensen, smiling at the table with the union. Yusan teased Kanhen. He thought he had no friends. He will not be able to recruit anyone. Kanhyun was surprised and asked what he said, entering into conversation. He retorted he has several friends, but thought for a moment, or maybe not. He stated that it doesn't matter. He was the first to bring the new person to the guild, and therefore won the dispute. Kanhyun recalled that the loser treats, but Yusin said that he was constantly treating. Yusin agreed with a loss, but recalled the need to go through a test for joining their guild. Everyone decided to go to the dungeon. The girl expressed readiness without hesitation. Kanhyun noted that Yusin clearly wants to start a fight as soon as possible. His fists are scratching. Dungeon, clutch harpies. Harpies attacked from all sides. Yusin, Sonu, Kanhyun, and the girl stood in the center, ready for battle. The girl pulled on the bow and shot right on the forehead of one of the harpies. Harpy collapsed to the ground, amazed at the exact hit. Yusin admitted that the trucker in the team helps a lot. Now the team is like a real one. Kanhyun asked if the girl had a test. Yusin was surprised. He completely forgot about it and tried to get out. But he was convicted of his desire to just hunt. The girl took out a dagger and said that she would go to collect magic crystals. Kanhyun advised not to waste time on trifles, but the girl said that she liked it. Yusin recalled that crystals are money and you should not scatter them. Kanhyun objected that he was not a beggar. He prefers to earn on the nuclei of the dungeons. Kanhyun asked what Yusin earnings. He boasted that he had a lot of money, he did not need it, but Kanhyun did not believe it. Kanhyun thought and asked if he also felt a strange tension. The girl looked at them and asked what exactly happened. Kenken's eyes flashed, and he waved his fist on the guy. The blow fell right on the cheek, the guy whipped, falling to the ground. Kanhyun noted that the guy was hiding well and disappeared to be unnoticed. I use invisibility. Despite the good choika, Kanhyun did not notice the approach of the enemy. He did not feel the thirst for blood with the guy. He is not here. Kanhyun wondered why the guy generally go here with such secrecy. Yusin suggested that the guy just passed by. Do not worry. Kanhyun reproached Yusan for the lack of caution. He noted that sneaking up to the hunter in the dungeon is a bad tone. The guy remained off after the blow. Kanhyun began to express his assumption about the motifs of the guy. There was a signature on the document. The contract was concluded. The man thanked Kanhyun for his cooperation. Kanhyun replied that he was ready to help if necessary. The man said that there is already a matter. He asked if Kanhyun knew about the attack in the dungeon. It was about intentional provocation of the breakthrough. The man explained that their team is watching the guilty. Soon a large-scale raid is planned. Then Kanken's help will be needed. The contract and the upcoming mission have become the key moments of the meeting. The guy sat tied against the wall. His face was doused with a strange liquid. He opened his eyes and in confusion asked what was happening. Kanhyun said the guy woke up. The guy did not understand how he was in this position. He was indignant because of the pungent smell and dirt. Kanhyun apologized and explained the situation. Water was replaced by urine due to a shortage of reserves. The guy was very surprised by such an explanation. His shock intensified from what he heard. The situation remained tense and strange. The guy had a gag reflex from the words of Kanhyun. He was indignant that the urine of the monster was poured on him. Kanhyun demanded answers to questions. He stated that the guy is a terrorist. The guy contemptuously responded about the name terrorist. He said that their actions are for the sake of a great goal. Ken Hyun said that he does not give a damn about their goals. He demanded the truth in return for freedom. The guy refused to tell anything. He assured that nothing would stop them. The day was replaced in the evening. The guy finally spoke and asked him to give him a word. Ken Hyun answered calmly that he was in no hurry, noticing the remaining teeth of the guy. The guy screamed. The sun hid behind the horizon. Arriving civil servants asked if Ken Hyun really caught a terrorist. Ken Hyun showed the guy and confirmed this. The guy begged for salvation. The man asked what happened to him. Ken Hyun suggested that Garpi could attack. The guy was taken away, promising to take care of everything. Yusun said goodbye to the official. He bowed back. Ken Hyun asked if he was familiar with the official. Yusun said that he offered a contract, but he refused. Yusun said that he has no interest in such matters. Ken Hyun joked about the politeness of Yusun. We decided to discuss all the details tomorrow without strangers. The night changed in the morning. The official said the name of the terrorist, Jung Eon-sik. The unique ability of the terrorist was secrecy. It is important for the organization. Ken Hyun noted that the spy did not report anything new. The official said that the base of terrorists was found. Large-scale stripping is planned in 2 weeks. Cannon was surprised why preparation takes so much time. The official recalled that the gates of the S-rank were first activated in China. He confirmed that the media are silent for important information. 1,200 people participated in the last cleansing. The majority died. Cannon was very surprised by such losses. He was reminded that he himself cleaned the D-Arrange's dungeons alone. He has known how dangerous it is. The danger of the dungeon increases with the rank of geometric progression. Canhen thought that twice as many people needed to be raised. He believed that one would cope with such a task. In China, they acted on the basic theory of the dungeons, but crashed. Many people volunteered to help, but their abilities were mediocre. Therefore, we decided to create an elite group for the Gate of C rank in Kanam. The task is to clean the forest of Viandi. The gates were guarded by the military. Canhen thought about why participate if the Chinese themselves cope. He suggested that the breakthrough can be avoided by destroying ordinary nuclei. The official noted that no one has managed to destroy the usual core so far. If nothing is done, the breakthrough will happen within 2 weeks. It remains 12 days before the opening of the gate. Monsters can kill hundreds of people in the center of Seoul, where it is always crowded. Kanhen was confused and realized that good preparation was needed. Experts believe that there will be even more victims than at the first cleansing. Time is running out, and Kanhen's participation is extremely important. He noted that freedom of action makes his mission key. The official said that they would not be able to act alone. He asked Kanhyun to establish a guild for the sake of the country. All formal procedures will take on and provide support. Kanhyun thought about the request and conditions. He realized that the creation of the guild is inevitable. At the same time, they are offered to do most of the work. Kanhyun believed that luck is on his side. Later in a cafe, Kanhan proposed to come up with a name for the guild. Yusan was surprised that there are only 3 participants so far. You need to choose the name right now. Kanhan recalled a meeting with an official from the government. Yusan grinned, thinking about stripping the dungeon of C rank. We discussed the policy of the guild. Not to enter into empty conflicts. Always pay off, good and bad. Do not become bandits, but also not to be fools. The main goal is to be stronger than anyone. Yusan and Sona agreed with the plan. Kenhan promised to remember this forever. Yusun proposed a name. Ebantijirsh rejected because of the mat. Then Yusun proposed a lunatic. Kanhyun asked to recall the meaning of the word. The meaning is the same as the first name. The girl thought. The powerful bunch of Kanan suggested. Kanhyun realized that he would have to come up with himself. Yusan laughed. Kanhyun wrote the name on the sheet. Yusun and Sona approved. Young Yansik was caught, a breakthrough plan for the High-G plane tour. Ken Hyun is known for single feats in catching secretive opponents. Problems with the search for subjects are slowed by scientific research. The girl is afraid to become experimental in the experiment. With drugs, she must find the subjects in time. The internet is discussing the creation of an elite team to clean up the S-rank dungeon. Forest funds will become an arena of a large-scale battle with monsters. New guilds are of great interest among the public and experts. The Dangun Guild is influential and irreplaceable in the Korean arena. The alliance of users of abilities attracts attention, but causes doubts. The Hwarn Guild is strong in battle, although the leader does not stand out in appearance. Eternity is a top guild with the legendary composition of the fighters. Keepers are considered a reliable but less well-known guild. Black Knights stand out with style and combine the elite of the top 10. The successive guilds will decide the fate of Korea in the upcoming sweep. Excitement and expectation growing as it approaches the mission. Comments on the network are violently discussing beginners at number 7. No one had heard about the Badass Guild. Consider them weak. The name of the guild causes ridicule and comparison with rude words. Beginners have just registered and raised doubts among the public. In the conference hall, guild leaders gathered for an important meeting. Kan-hyun lingered and was late for the first collection of guilds. He introduced himself as the leader of the guild Badass, arousing surprise and interest. People then called this event with the first guild of the guild. After many such exits, no one will surprise anyone. The dungeon era began 6 months ago with a general sleep in 7 billion people. This dream changed the world and caused chaos around new guilds. Among the many guilds, one special is distinguished. Bad AC. The name Bad Ace raises ridicule and questions in people. Section of users of abilities under the leadership of the Shinty Guild, as can be called assholes. Kan-hyun considers the name closer to the added than to the asshole. The man doubts, but Kan-hyun is sure that the name sounds cool. Next week, a meeting on the dungeon with a rank in the forest will take place. The meeting is scheduled for 11 a.m. Monday. Participants are strongly recommended not to be late for an important event. The era of the dungeons turned the world into chaos. Hundreds of people disappeared daily. 4 days later, Monday came, the day of the appointed meeting. Yusin was waiting at the entrance, noting that Kan-hyun did not come again on time. Kan-hyun appeared late, calmly waving his hand on the way. He said that he had lingered for domestic reasons, not particularly apologizing. Yusin looked at his outfit and noted an absurd children's t-shirt. Kan-hyun explained that the character on clothes is now very popular. Yusan was not convinced but continued to observe in silence. The internet is actively discussing the reputation of Kan-hyun, full of negativity and rumors. Particular attention is paid to the appearance, comparing it with a street bandit. To change the perception, Kan-hyun decided to add a little friendliness to the image. His choice fell on a bright t-shirt with a children's character to soften the image. Yusin was surprised at a strange approach and doubted the effectiveness of the idea. He noted that even with a t-shirt, the appearance of Kan-hyun frightening. If he saw this t-shirt in childhood, he would roar. Kan-hyun thought about the words and remembered the case with the children in the parking lot. He came to the conclusion that the children burst into tears precisely because of him. The understanding of this fact clearly upset him, but he did not show him. An attempt to look amiably turned into another strange situation. A room for meetings. Time goes on. Already 11:05, still not started. The leader of eternity looks at the clock. The situation is intense. Kan Mun is irritated. We agreed to start at 11. Lich Han Noon from Black Knight's notes. 2 more guilds are waiting. Pak Soken from the Keepers frowns. This time Hwarn is not alone. The leader Dan Gun and the head of the Alliance are also waiting. The views become sharp. Shinigol goes to the elevator, tries to get through. The called subscriber does not answer. Again. He is gaining Yusin. Hopes to the answer. First he is taken for a telephone scammer. Yusin is having fun. He says that soon everyone will laugh. Shintegel is confused, asked to come to the meeting. A roar is heard from the elevator. Kan-hyun comes out, dragging the guy's goal. Pak Hayon does not believe his eyes. Kan-hyun clapped with the leader of Hwarn. He thinks the one that is completely crazy. He is the top 3 Korea. But Kan-hyun looks coldly. He is not interested in titles. A few minutes ago, the Trinity entered the elevator. Kan-hyun pressed the button of the 11th floor. The doors almost closed, but at the last moment, a hand slipped into the gap. A man in a cloak and 2 fighters in massive armor went inside, stomping loudly on the floor. The elevator shuddered. The leader of the Knights announced the destination, also the 11th. In the elevator, they shook their hands. One introduced himself as a master of Kfornyon, the second, the leader of Badass. Kan-hyun mentally cursed the delay. The hand of the clock rose higher. The electronic voice announced the overload and demanded to leave the cab. All glances fell on the armor of the Knights, looking like costumes from fantasy films. Kan-hyun was surprised why such an entourage for a regular meeting and not stripping. The leader of Vornyon with a smile proposed a decision. They will rise the first. Kan-hyun was surprised, but the leader explained, the status of a large guild gives priority. Yusin and Sona looked at each other, not believing in what was happening. The argument sounded simple. Important people should go first. Kanyun was boiling silently. The politeness is over. The leader is a sore, with a grin hinted that small guilds should give way to greater. Kanyun squinted. The meaning of the words was clear. They were simply considered back. Yusin bowed his head slightly, already calculating the fighting points on the enemy's body. He unemotionally evaluated how many teeth can be knocked out of one blow. Kanyun grinned. The atmosphere in the elevator became more and more intense. The leader as a horseman tried to justify himself, saying that this did not mean, but even apologies sounded condescendingly as from someone confident in superiority. Yusin, without blinking, appreciated the option to break the legs first and leave his teeth for later. Kanyun smiled, restraining irritation while the enemy broadcast about the importance of the event. His face became serious when he mentioned his strange illness. Intolerance to arrogance. Yusin laughed, and the tension in the elevator increased sharply. Later, in a conference room, the official reproached. He warned that this was an important event. The fight was not justified. One of the leaders tried to defuse the situation, offering new guilds to introduce himself. The official supported the idea and turned to Kanyun with a request for an idea. Kanyun shrugged, counting a similar ceremony strange, but still began. He calmly introduced himself as the leader of the Guild of Badass, noting that there are only 3 of them. The sorcerer did not hide the shock. The 3 participations seemed absurd to him. His anger intensified while Kanhen retorted with lazy contempt, calling him Anus Dokapanus. One of the leaders of the guild laughed and expressed sympathy for the character of Kanyun. The sore was boiled with anger, but he was seated in place so as not to tear the meeting. Yusin quietly called Kanhen and pointed to the man by the wall. He was the leader of the Guild of the Guardians, a familiar face from the past. Yusin tightly squeezed the hilt of the maces, preparing to deal with it right here.